Chapter 745. Shangguan Wan's hand went straight for Chu Liyue's slender neck. It was as if with a slight twist, she could break this slender and fair neck and completely take away Chu Liyue's life. Chu Liyue's entire body was enveloped by a terrifying pressure, and she couldn't move. A murderous intent flashed across Dumpling's eyes, and she immediately chased after her. Shangguan Wan raised her eyes and looked at Dumpling expressionlessly. The huge net that she had just broken free from was once again blocking in front of her. Moreover, this net had clearly been repaired, and it was even more dense and difficult to deal with than before. Dumpling's speed slowed down. However, in this moment of slowing down, the distance between Chu Liyue and Shangguan Wan had rapidly shortened. Shangguan Wan's meticulously trimmed nails were about to scratch Chu Liyue's creamy skin. Suddenly, a vigorous aura erupted from Chu Liyue's body. Shangguan Wan's wooden expression finally cracked. She retreated in shock, but her eyes were still fixed on Chu Liyue. "No wonder you're so arrogant. So you still have such a trump card." That aura just now was clearly above a 9th-stage warrior. Chu Liyue's body actually hid such a strong warrior's strength. Although Shangguan Wan's voice didn't change, her tone was different from before, as if she had changed into a different person. Without her control and threat, Chu Liyue fell from the sky. When her feet stepped on the ground again, she let out a long breath in her heart and said gratefully, "Thank you, Taizu." She really didn't expect that Taizu would take the initiative to attack in that situation just now. Taizu didn't say anything, but he firmly protected Chu Liyue. Shangguan Wan looked at Chu Liyue suspiciously. Chu Liyue also looked up at the other side. This time, both sides fell into a short silence and stalemate. The air seemed to have condensed, and it was suffocating. On the surface, this was a duel between Shangguan Wan and Chu Liyue, but in reality, it was no longer. Suddenly, there was a fluctuation in the air. Shangguan Wan immediately turned her head to look. Her expression was cold. This scene must not be seen by anyone. Just as she was about to move, she suddenly heard a sound that was neither loud nor soft. Seemed like something had broken? Shangguan Wan looked down. A crack suddenly appeared in the middle of the stone platform. Chu Liyue also saw this scene. But in reality, she knew that this crack had been there for a long time. That crack was slowly but surely spreading in all directions, expanding at a speed visible to the naked eye. The uneasiness in Chu Liyue's heart grew stronger. She quickly summoned Dumpling. Just as a hand touched Dumpling's neck, she saw a faint green light rush out from the crack. Then the entire stone platform was filled with cracks. It began to collapse. At the same time, countless tree roots fell from above. They swept toward the two of them. Chu Liyue quickly jumped onto Dumpling's back. However, at that moment, the entire stone platform collapsed. The faint green light lit up the entire space. Then, a terrifying suction force came from below. Shangguan Wan's feet were empty, and she fell straight down. She was about to be devoured. However, at that moment, she suddenly grabbed a tree root and shook it to Chu Liyue's side. She grabbed Chu Liyue's ankle. Chu Liyue wanted to defend, but she suddenly realized that she could not use the force around her. It was the same for Taizu's force. In that moment, Shangguan Wan grabbed Chu Liyue. Then she pulled fiercely. Everything happened too quickly. Before Chu Liyue could react, she was already forcefully pulled down. Chu Liyue raised her leg and kicked Shangguan Wan fiercely. Shangguan Wan's face immediately turned to the side from the kick. A few of her teeth also fell out. In her panic, she only had time to put on the pure gold sacred armor and forgot to put on the helmet. However, she quickly reacted. As long as Chu Liyue did not hurt her head or face, she could easily take down Chu Liyue. Enveloped by the faint green light, both of them could not use their force. They could only rely on their physical strength. Shangguan Wan's eyes were fierce. She grabbed Chu Liyue's ankle tightly and pushed hard. Chu Liyue fell. Dumpling flapped her wings and scratched Shangguan Wan's face fiercely. Her sharp claws instantly scratched Shangguan Wan's face. The few scratches were shocking. They were so deep that the bones could be seen. Shangguan Wan screamed and was about to think of a way to retaliate when Dumpling quickly chased after Chu Luiyue. Saving Master is more important. As for Shangguan Wan, when we meet again, I will definitely return the favor. Dumpling's figure followed closely behind Chu Luiyue and disappeared into the dense, faint green light below. Shangguan Wan hugged the tree root tightly, afraid that she would accidentally fall down. Who knows what's down there? At this moment, the air was torn apart. Two silhouettes walked out one after the other. It was Qin Yi and Chang Wanzhou. The black rune on Shangguan Wan's glabella instantly disappeared. The dazed expression on her face gradually faded, and she returned to her previous look filled with anger and resentment. She shuddered. Just now, was I being controlled by that person just now? She's right here, Chang Wanzhou was speaking when he suddenly saw the scene in front of him. Shock flashed across his eyes, and his voice stopped abruptly. Qin Yi reacted faster than him. When he saw the stage that was almost completely collapsing and the strange faint green light in the middle, he immediately realized that something was amiss. He quickened his steps and rushed over. In the end, he saw Shangguan Wan struggling to climb up. Other than her, there was no one else around. Chu Luiyue isn't here. Qin Yi's gaze finally landed on the abyss below. Other than the blinding light, he couldn't see anything. He was just standing at the edge, but he felt like he was about to be swallowed. Where is she? Chang Wanzhou also followed over and stared at Shangguan Wan as he questioned her coldly. Shangguan Wan recognized the two of them and felt a chill in her heart. However, she still forced herself to say, "It's good that you're here. It's good that you're here. Hurry and save me." Chang Wanzhou's voice was even colder. "I'm asking you, where is she?" Shangguan Wan could only pretend that she didn't know. "What are you talking about? Who is she? I'm the only one here from start to end. Hurry, hurry and pull me up. She can't hold on for too long just by relying on her own strength. Someone must bring her out from the outside." Murderous intent appeared on Chang Wanzhou's face. "I can clearly feel Chu Luiyue's aura here. She must have been here before." Looking at Shangguan Wan's haggard appearance, she clearly just went through an intense battle. Clang! Chang Wanzhou suddenly pulled out his sword. A sparrow blue flame flashed past. He held the cloud sky copper sword tightly in his hands. Then, he slashed at the tree root that Shangguan Wan was hugging. Since Shangguan Wan isn't willing to tell the truth, then, I'll just kill her. Digression. It's better to be together at 6 p.m. for the rest of the time. My 5-year-old computer is barely hanging on, and the exhaust fan is so hot that you can fry an egg on it. I brought it to be repaired. Mending and mending for another 3 years, mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from AI Web. Chapter 746. A piercing sword light flashed across. Shangguan Wan's heart skipped a beat. She watched as the cloud sky copper sword was about to cut that tree root. But just as it was about to touch it, Qin Yi suddenly pressed down on Chang Wanzhou's wrist. His actions were very light, as if he was just touching it lightly. However, Chang Wanzhou's actions instantly stopped. Anger was written all over Chang Wanzhou's beautiful face as he gripped the sword hilt tightly with both hands and increased his strength as he tried to resist. However, Qin Yi was simply too strong, and he suppressed Chang Wanzhou completely without batting an eyelid. The moment he put his hand down, Chang Wanzhou couldn't move at all. Realizing that he was indeed not Qin Yi's match, Chang Wanzhou looked up angrily. "I don't believe that Qin Yi can't tell what's going on here. Why did he stop me? It's not enough even if Shangguan Wan dies 10,000 times." Qin Yi's expression had already regained its calmness, and his long and narrow eyes were filled with darkness. "We haven't made things clear yet, so don't jump to conclusions." Then, he looked at Shangguan Wan with a gentle expression. "We'll save you first." Shangguan Wan was elated as she nodded profusely. After Qin Yi said that, he actually waved his sleeves and threw out a rope that wrapped around Shangguan Wan's waist. With a light flick of his wrist, Shangguan Wan was pulled up. After leaving the area enveloped by the dark green light, Shangguan Wan instantly felt as if she had crawled up from hell. She turned around to take a look with lingering fear, and her entire body was drenched in cold sweat. If I didn't grab that tree root just now and wasn't careful, I would have been the one falling down. Coincidentally, there was another ripple in the air at this moment. A figure walked out from within. Shangguan turned around and was instantly shocked. The person who came was actually Jiang Yuqing. Yuqing! Exclaimed Shangguan as she hurriedly ran over and pounced into his arms. Yuqing! You are finally here! Jiang Yuqing didn't notice it for a moment and was thrown into his arms. He subconsciously put his arms around Shangguan's waist. Shangguan cried in his arms. I was so scared. I almost died for a long time. Yuqing, did you specially come here to look for me? Jiang Yuqing knew where she was. Since he had appeared now, he must be here for her. Shangguan had been through those things before, so she had accumulated a lot of emotions. At this time, seeing Jiang Yuqing, she finally couldn't hold back and burst out. Fear, anxiety. In this short period of time, she had experienced several life and death situations in succession, and her mental state had been extremely tense. Now, he could finally relax a little. The front of Jiang Yuqing's shirt was soon soaked by Shangguan's tears. Her arms were tightly wrapped around him, and her body was still trembling slightly. It was obvious that she was extremely scared. Even Jiang Yuqing rarely saw her like this. As he softly comforted her, he gently patted her shoulders. It's fine. Aren't I here now? Don't worry. When Chang Wanzhou saw Jiang Yuqing, who suddenly appeared, he pressed his lips together and glanced at Qin. It turns out that he already sensed someone coming. Furthermore, this person is Jiang Yuqing. It's not hard to imagine what the outcome would be if Jiang Yuqing came and saw me planning to kill Shangguan. But even so, what about Chu Luiyue? Chang Wanzhou looked at the deep abyss in the middle and held the cloud sky copper sword in his hands tightly. Jiang Yuqing hugged Shangguan and comforted her, but his gaze was darting around as if he was looking for someone. In between his brows, there was a tinge of undetectable worry. Qin Yi saw it clearly and couldn't help but laugh in his heart as mockery flashed across his eyes. He lightly said, Jiang Yuqing, you came quickly. Eldest young Master Jiang, you came so quickly. We just arrived, yet you followed right behind us. Jiang Yuqing's expression froze. My cultivation level isn't as high as Qin Yi's, and I'm also injured. Logically speaking, it's impossible for me to arrive so quickly. The most important thing is that I didn't come with the two of them, yet I still came here. Without a proper reason, it definitely can't be justified. Not long after you left, I received Wanna's call for help, so I chased her here. Jiang Yuqing roughly explained. He didn't intend to tangle with the two of them. No matter whether they believed it or not, they had no right to question him. After all, he and Shangguan were engaged, and they both had respectable statuses. It was very normal for them to have some trump cards. Then he seemed to be reprimanding and heartache as he said, Why did you send the news so late? We almost went crazy looking for you. Shangguan knew what she should do at this time. Besides, she also wanted to hide it a little. She didn't say anything and just hugged Jiang Yuqing even tighter as she sobbed. Qin Yi looked at the two of them nonchalantly as if he didn't have any intention of asking. I see. Jiang Yuqing secretly heaved a sigh of relief in his heart as he scrutinized the surroundings in detail. He then asked, What, are you the only one here? Shangguan laid in his arms, so everyone couldn't see her expression. Shangguan nodded hesitantly, and her voice was muffled. This means, we've already dealt with Chu Luiyue? Jiang Yuqing was stunned. He felt lost and even a little hurt. It was as if someone was holding a needle and stabbing it into his heart, causing a fine and continuous pain. Actually, he had been very conflicted in his heart. On one hand, Chu Luiyue had probably guessed what Shangguan was doing. From all aspects, he had to kill her. Otherwise, there would be endless trouble in the future. However, on the other hand, he had been very uneasy and worried. Once he thought of the scene of Chu Luiyue being killed by Shangguan, he felt very uncomfortable. Originally, he didn't intend to come. However, by the time he reacted, he was already here. Somehow, it was as if he was being driven by something. Jiang Yuqing didn't dare to think too much as if there was a taboo in his heart. Once touched, it would be a complete collapse. Shengguan naturally didn't know anything about this. She just thought that Jiang Yuqing really came because he was worried about her. After all, he knew why I came to Dahuang Swamp this time. Thinking of this, Shengguan felt hatred in her heart. I still have a bit of my Yuan meridian to recover. If it wasn't for Chu Luiwei, Jiang Yuqing looked down. Judging from this chaotic scene, a huge battle must have happened just now. He furrowed his brows slightly. If Shengguan wanted to kill Chu Luiwei, it should have been very easy. Why did it cause such a huge commotion? Could it be because of that red-tailed phoenix? Since eldest young Master Jiang is here, take the third princess and leave first. Qini spoke. I'll go and see what's down there. Jiang Yuqing followed his line of sight and immediately understood what Qini meant. He actually wants to jump down into that strange abyss that's emitting a dark green glow? What do you want to do? When Shengguan heard this, she instantly looked up and asked agitatedly. Since I killed Chu Luiwei, I definitely won't allow anyone to save him. Jiang Yuqing patted her shoulder and persuaded her gently and patiently. Young Master Qin should have just. Jiang Yuqing's voice stopped abruptly as he pushed Shengguan away as if he had seen a ghost. That face, which used to be considered pretty, was now covered in blood and flesh, looking as terrifying as a malicious ghost. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from AI. Net. Chapter 747. Shengguan was suddenly pushed away by Jiang Yuqing. Her expression changed, and anger rose from her heart. Just as she was about to speak, she happened to meet Jiang Yuqing's eyes. There was also a trace of disgust that was hidden very deeply, but she could still see it. Shengguan was suddenly stunned, and then belatedly remembered that her face had been scratched by the red gold phoenix. Jiang Yuqing was disdaining her face? Shengguan only felt cold all over, and all the blood in her body rushed to her head. An indescribable anger exploded in her heart. Jiang Yuqing saw the change in her eyes and realized that his push just now was inappropriate, so he quickly took a step forward. Your face? How did you get this injury? His words were sincere, and his expression was anxious, as if he was very worried. But the disgust on his face just now had been deeply engraved in Shengguan's mind. There was no woman in the world who didn't care about her face. Especially a princess from the imperial family like Shengguan, who valued her appearance even more. From her hair to her toes, there was nothing that wasn't exquisite. From her hairpin to her boots, there was nothing that wasn't exquisite. Her status was noble, and she was the center of attention. Her every word and action had to be paid special attention. Not to mention her face? With a disfigured face, who knew what kind of joke she would be if she went out? Shengguan had been on the verge of death before, and it wasn't easy for her to survive. She didn't have time to think about her face at all. Now, Jiang Yuqing's reaction finally reminded her of this matter, and it caused a great shock to her. Shengguan sneered. You didn't ask me if it hurt, but asked me how I got this injury first? Jiang Yuqing secretly said that he had miscalculated. Normally, he definitely wouldn't have made such a low-level mistake. But just now, he didn't take any precautions and most of his attention wasn't on Shengguan, so his reaction was a little more direct. As a result, it turned out like this. He knew Shengguan too well. He was afraid that she would hold a grudge against him for a long time. Jiang Yuqing suddenly felt a headache coming on. He had experienced enough things before, and his body was barely holding on. He had no extra energy to deal with Shengguan. I don't mean anything else. I'm just too worried about you, Shengguan sneered with a mocking expression. Her expression made Jiang Yuqing feel as if a fishbone was stuck in his throat, and he didn't bother to say the rest of his explanation and comforting words. In the past, Shengguan was very gentle and considerate most of the time. This was also one of the important reasons why he liked her. Although he also knew that Shengguan was not as innocent and harmless as she looked, he did not mind. With such a background, it was normal for her to be scheming and scheming. However, in the past 2 years, she had become sharper and more sensitive. She would often hold onto a small matter and cause a huge commotion. Jiang Yuqing had long been tired, and his patience was wearing thin day by day. He let out a long sigh in his heart, tried his best to suppress his impatience, and persuaded, "These are all wounds. These are all superficial wounds. After we go back and apply Bingji ointment on them for a while, they will naturally heal." Previously, Yuji also accidentally hurt her face, but it healed quickly. "You can't see anything." Shangguan didn't think much of it and listened to his words as if she was listening to a joke. Of course, she knew that the wounds on her face could be healed. However, Jiang Yuqing's push just now. "I will never forget it." Qin Yi was too lazy to care about the two of them and walked straight over. Chang Wanzhou immediately followed. Qin Yi glanced at him. "Just stay there. Even I find it dangerous." "Isn't Chang Wanzhou courting death by coming over?" Chang Wanzhou moved. After hesitating for a while, he still listened to Qin. "I know my limits. If Qin Yi went over, he might be able to bring Chu Liwei back, but if I go, I might just become a burden." Shangguan glanced over from the corner of her eye and saw Qin Yi walking to the edge. She immediately said, "You can't go down." Qin Yi acted like he didn't hear her. Shangguan anxiously said, "It's dangerous. It's dangerous. It's very dangerous down there. You'll just be courting death if you go." Jiang Yuqing also looked over and knitted his brows. "It seems like Chu Liwei fell down there. That aura is very dangerous, and Chu Liwei should have gone down for a while already. I'm afraid." Rumble. A loud boom suddenly came from the abyss. Qin Yi's expression changed. The dark green light glowed brightly. A strong force surged out from within. The surrounding black swamp started to surge crazily. Qin Yi originally wanted to rush in directly, but he was stopped by the crazy force outside. At that moment, the world spun. The few of them disappeared on the spot. At the same time, the same scene was playing out in the underground of the mystic forest. Bang! The dull sound of a heavy object hitting the ground was heard. After that sound, it didn't stop. Accompanying it were all sorts of painful cries. This sound made Qin Yi abruptly open his eyes. He suddenly came out of the dark underground, and the surrounding light was so piercing that it hurt his eyes. However, he still bore with the pain and quickly looked around. We're still in the mystic forest. Judging from the messy and broken trees around us, it shouldn't be far from where we were previously. He looked up and indeed saw that mother tree in the distance. Chang Wanzhou wasn't far behind him to the right, and he didn't seem to be severely injured. Jiang Yuqing and Shangguan were in front of him. There was a distance between the two of them. When he looked further away, there were people all around them. Most of them were from the Black Cavalry, and some were disciples from other clans. Qin Yi knitted his brows. "It seems like everyone has been chased out. Whose power was that just now? It's actually so strong? Even I can't resist it at all. Big brother." This was Lei Laoxi's voice. Qin Yi turned around and indeed saw Lei Laoxi running over. When he reached Qin Yi, Lei Laoxi anxiously asked, "Big brother?" Qin Yi cut him off. "Hello, third princess." Lei Laoxi hurriedly kept quiet, but his eyes were still filled with anxiousness and worry. Where's Chu Liwei?" "I don't know why, but everyone was chased out by a strong force just now." He immediately saw Big Brother here and rushed over excitedly, but he realized that Chu Liwei wasn't here. "We've already found Shangguan and Jiang Yuqing, so why is Her Highness missing?" Qin Yi's expression dulled. "We haven't found her yet." "You haven't found her? How can this be?" Lei Laoxi suddenly thought of something, and his voice stopped abruptly as shock flashed across his eyes. He then swiftly scanned his surroundings and carefully scanned everyone's faces. But it's still not. Her Highness is actually not here." Unwilling to give up, he lifted his feet and walked to the other side. At this moment, Shangguan's voice was heard. "Everyone should have come out by now. Could it be that those who haven't come out have already?" Digression. The fifth update was around 6:30 p.m. She silently jotted it down in her notebook. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 748. Sheng Guanwan didn't finish her sentence. That was because Lei Laosi looked over. This time, he didn't scold her with a hoarse voice and only glanced at Sheng Guanwan. However, that glance was extremely cold. He was originally very capable, and with this cold and fierce glance, he was even more intimidating. Sheng Guanwan subconsciously shuddered, and a tinge of fear grew in her heart. She subconsciously swallowed the rest of her words. However, the hands in her sleeves were already tightly clenched. She looked down and hid the anger in her eyes. When I leave this place, I must find a chance to settle this Lei Laosi. I still remember the scene of Lei Laosi fighting with me previously. I'll settle the old and new grudges together then. Lei Laosi sneered, and his expression looked extremely ferocious and scary. I can see through Sheng Guanwan's thoughts. If I wasn't in a hurry to find Her Highness, I definitely wouldn't let her off so easily. Lei Laosi retracted his gaze and walked forward with big strides. This time, Qin Yi didn't stop him. Lei Laosi searched very carefully. Even though he remembered Chu Liuyue's figure, he still seriously looked at every face that he passed by. Some had their backs facing him, and some were lying on the floor. He walked over patiently and searched them one by one. After confirming that it wasn't her, he then continued forward. Sheng Guanwan looked at Lei Laosi's back view and knitted her brows tightly. She turned and saw Mu Qinghe. Vice Admiral Mu. Mu Qinghe walked over. Elder Qiushi also came along with her. He quickly caught up to Mu Qinghe and shouted excitedly, "Mu Qinghe, you're the one who gave me the permission to do so." He said excitedly, "Your Highness. We finally found you. You don't know how worried we were for you for such a long time." Mu Qinghe glanced at him and didn't say anything. She then bowed to Sheng Guanwan and Jiang Yuqing respectively. "Your Highness, eldest young master." Elder Qiushi wiped his tears with his sleeve. "Your Highness, we are relieved to see that you are safe and sound. We didn't look for you in vain." Sheng Guanwan's attention was finally attracted by his words. She frowned and looked puzzled. "Elder Qiushi, what do you mean by that? You guys have been looking for me all this time?" Elder Qiushi immediately recounted what had happened. Of course, he emphasized his concern for Sheng Guanwan and emphasized that it was under his urging that everyone finally decided to come down to look for her. Because these people were not bound by the roots the second time they came down, Sheng Guanwan was not very clear about this. "So that's how it is. Thank you for your hard work." Sheng Guanwan gritted her teeth and said word by word. If it weren't for these people, she wouldn't have been delayed by Chu Liyue. Elder Qiushi was talking smugly when he suddenly noticed that Sheng Guanwan's mood seemed to be a bit off, so he kept quiet. His gaze quickly swept across Sheng Guanwan's face. I wonder what exactly she went through for her to end up like this. Even though Elder Qiushi's gaze was extremely light and his movements were extremely small, Sheng Guanwan still noticed it. The resentment in her heart deepened, but she couldn't flare up in front of so many people right now. She hurriedly took out a scarf and covered her face. Although her forehead and eyebrows were exposed, and the ghastly wounds could still be seen, it still looked much better than her entire face that was torn apart. She looked at Mu Qinghe. Vice Admiral Mu, Lei Laosi and Chu Liyue seemed to have a good relationship. "Do you know what happened?" Mu Qinghe shook her head and said hesitantly, "Lei Laosi and Lei Laosi have been guarding the nine-eyed beasts for a long time. Lei Laosi and the other two have always been in charge of guarding the nine-colored heavenly pheasant. Now that the nine-colored heavenly pheasant has broken through and become a red-tailed phoenix, it has made an agreement with Chu Liyue. It's probably related to this matter." It was fine if they didn't mention the red-tailed phoenix, but the moment they mentioned Sheng Guanwan, she was filled with anger. The mythical beast that originally belonged to her was gone, and it even scratched her face. Now that Chu Liyue was dead, that mythical beast definitely wouldn't be able to live either. "This place is very dangerous. We must leave as soon as possible." Jiang Yuqing walked over and said in a low voice. Sheng Guanwan wanted to refute, but she saw Jiang Yuqing looking at a certain spot with a solemn expression. She couldn't help but follow his line of sight, and her breathing suddenly stopped. She saw that the mother tree was withering at a speed visible to the naked eye. A gust of wind blew past, and countless leaves turned from green to yellow before falling down. What was even more terrifying was that after those leaves fell to the ground, they actually silently transformed into puddles of blood. Very quickly, a blood-colored puddle was piled up on the ground. And it was still spreading to the surroundings at a terrifying speed. Everywhere it passed by, everything was silently corroded. Such a bloody and bizarre scene caused everyone to be dumbstruck. Everyone hurriedly got up and kept retreating. "We can't stay in this place anymore. Let's go. Let's go." The crowd was in chaos. Vaguely, someone seemed to be sucking something. Lu Yu, where are you? Mu Hongyu, Yi Ran, and the rest were looking for Chu Luyue. There were also many black cavalry soldiers who were looking for Chu Luyue's whereabouts. Miss Chu, you guys search here, we'll go over there." "Okay." Almost half of the people in the crowd were looking for Chu Luyue. Shengguan was stunned by this scene. What was going on? What happened when she wasn't around? Just as she was about to ask, she suddenly heard a cracking sound. She lowered her head and saw that there was a crack on the pure gold armor. Shengguan widened her eyes in shock. However, soon after, the crack began to spread rapidly. Bang! The pure gold armor dissipated. It turned into powder. At the same time, Chu Luyue was falling into the abyss. Her surroundings were strange and colorful. Her vision was chaotic, and she couldn't see anything. In the blur, a figure chased after her. It was Dumpling. It flew to Chu Luyue's body and lifted her up. Dumpling flapped its wings, wanting to leave with Chu Luyue. However, there seemed to be an invisible suction force below, dragging them all the way down. Violent turbulence spread out in all directions. The lower they went, the more terrifying it was. Countless small wounds instantly appeared on Chu Luyue's body. However, at this moment, her body was suddenly enveloped by a layer of faint golden light. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 749. The golden light enveloped Chu Luyue's body, isolating the surrounding terrifying airflow. Chu Luyue's face was filled with astonishment. This is glazed barrier? She could feel that this was indeed the power of the glazed barrier. But why did it turn from silver to gold? Furthermore, the glazed barrier was usually a spherical barrier. Chu Luyue had never seen a barrier that formed a layer of protection. Rather than calling it a barrier, it was better to call it armor. It was an armor. With such a tight fit, other than the fact that it wasn't a real object, it wasn't much different from an armor. Just as this thought flashed through Chu Luyue's mind, she saw the golden light on her arms suddenly condense. At first, she didn't notice it, but when she saw the strange patterns on it, she finally realized that something was wrong. Why did these patterns look so familiar? Chu Luyue stared at it for a while, then looked at her body. Indeed, she found that the golden light on other parts of her body was also condensing. From top to bottom. At her chest, a silver light suddenly flashed. Chu Luyue lowered her head to take a look, and her eyelids twitched violently. Because in front of her chest, there was actually a heart protection mirror. Chu Luyue blinked her eyes, and a trace of disbelief surged in her heart. This is as if to confirm her guess. The surrounding golden light condensed even faster. Not long after, it completely formed the appearance of an armor. This armor wasn't brand new, and there were many marks on it, as if it had experienced many intense battles. The faint golden color, warm and simple, thick and heavy. It perfectly fit Chu Luyue's body, as if it was specially made for her, outlining the perfect lines of her body. Chu Luyue was stunned for a long time. Looking at the armor that suddenly appeared on her body, she held her breath. There seemed to be blood flowing through her eardrums, and it was beating violently like her heart. Chu Luyue's breathing became hurried, and her entire body seemed to be ignited. Her cheeks were boiling, but her eyes were as bright as the most resplendent night sky. Pure gold sacred armor. This was really the pure gold sacred armor. Originally, she thought that it had been taken away by Shengguan, but she didn't expect it to appear here, on her body. Stars flashed in front of her eyes. Chu Luiyue looked up. Countless golden streams of light converged, and finally condensed into a helmet. It was the helmet of the pure gold sacred armor. Chu Luiyue's heart almost jumped out of her chest. She slowly stretched her hand, and held the helmet in her hand. It was cool to the touch, but it also had a trace of boiling heat. An extremely bright light from the top of the helmet's helmet. Immediately, with the light with the pure gold sacred armor's body armor, the armor pure gold sacred armor, instantly, like the wind with the wind, everything it was as if a layer of dust had finally been wiped off, revealing its original color and luster. The pure armor recognize its Chu Luiyue never expected the pure gold armor to return to her side in such a manner. In an instant, countless thoughts flashed through her mind. The reason why the pure gold sacred armor didn't recognize Shangguan as its new owner was most likely because her soul still existed. How did it come about? Chu Luiyue recalled the situation just now and was suddenly stunned. Could it be? Is this really related to the glazed barrier? At the thought of this, she tried to summon the glazed barrier. The pure gold sacred armor was overflowing with light and colors, and it gradually became transparent. It was like a layer of transparent and colorless soft armor that perfectly covered Chu Luiyue's body. Only when one looked carefully could one see the faint engravings on it. This was indeed the glazed barrier. But this was also the pure gold sacred armor. Seemed like, after encountering the pure gold sacred armor, the glazed barrier had changed. These two things had invisibly merged into one, and in the end, it appeared before her eyes in this way. Chu Luiyue's heart trembled. A scene suddenly appeared in her mind. The day before she left country Yao Chen's imperial capital, she accompanied Rong Xiu to play chess and informed him that she was about to leave and head to the Tianling dynasty. Rong Xiu said that the glazed barrier he gave her previously was damaged, so he would give her a new one. At that time, Chu Luiyue didn't pay much attention to it, because the second glazed barrier was exactly the same as the first one. From the outside, there was no difference at all. It wasn't until she arrived at Xiling, participated in the Wanzheng competition, and entered the Tianling God realm that she finally realized that this glazed barrier seemed to be a little different. Its defensive power was extraordinary. At that time, although Chu Luiyue was curious, she didn't think too much about it because the situation was urgent. Later on, he gradually forgot about this matter. If the glazed barrier hadn't taken the initiative to appear and protect her this time, she might not have remembered the existence of this little thing. Now that she thought about it, she had a clue. What kind of yuan instrument could easily block the sword aura of the long yuan sword? Although the glazed barrier was divided into several grades, this kind of power was simply too shocking. Even the best glazed barrier she had seen in her previous life might not be able to do this. Rong Xiu, Chu Luiyue mumbled softly with a complicated expression. A bold thought suddenly appeared in her mind. Rong Xiu, does he know something? Thousands of miles away. In the room, two people sat opposite each other. Pa 36 respected Elder Ming placed his last piece. On the chessboard, the black and white pieces went through an intense battle before the victor was finally decided. 36 respected Elder Ming's eyes lit up. I've finally won against you, Your Highness. Rong Xiu put the chess piece back into the chess jar and looked up with a faint smile. Respected Elder's power is superb. I admit defeat. His words were said casually, as if he had already expected this outcome. 36 respected Elder Ming was originally stroking his beard with a smile. When he saw Rong Xiu's expression, his heart skipped a beat. He accidentally pulled out 3 strands of his silver-white beard. Did Your Highness purposely let me win? Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly. No, I didn't. I thought too much and lost this round. Don't give me that. Do you think I can't tell whether you went easy on me or not? 36 respected Elder Ming glared at him angrily. When he played chess with Rong Xiu, he had almost never won. After studying for so long, he did not expect it to end up like this. His joyful mood was instantly reduced. However, after thinking about it, this outcome was normal. 36 respected Elder Ming was relieved. You started learning chess at the age of 5. When you were 6, you had few opponents. After you were 7, even I found it hard to win against you. After losing for so many years, do you think I'm a sore loser? I'm already used to it, okay? At the start, Rong Xiu went easy on him very obviously. Later on, he gradually hit it very well. If your highness wants to, you can definitely play all the chess players in the world in your hands. 36 respected Elder Ming let out a long sigh. Rong Xiu suddenly chuckled. His thin lips curled up slightly as he leaned against the back of the chair and said lazily, "Not necessarily. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network." Chapter 750. His voice was deep and mellow. With a chuckle, he sounded even more unrestrained. 36 respected Elder Ming lifted his eyelids and took a glance at him. Rong Xiu was smiling. There was a hint of a smile in between his eyebrows, like the beginning of spring. However, that pair of deep eyes wasn't looking at the chessboard. They were silent with hidden ripples, as though he had sunk into deep thought. 36 respected Elder Ming was a little surprised. Rong Xiu was actually a very prideful person. In terms of chess skills, he could be said to be the best of the best. 36 respected Elder Ming felt that his standard was already not bad. However, in front of Rong Xiu, he couldn't even find out his bottom line. At the very least, among the people that he knew, no one could win against Rong Xiu in this aspect. No, it should be said that there was no one who could compete with him. Your Highness, do you mean that there is someone who can compete with you? Yes. Rong Xiu tilted his body slightly and propped up his elbows. No one knew what he thought of, but he suddenly laughed. I have lost quite a number of times. 36 respected Elder Ming was even more shocked. From what he said, he didn't lose because he went easy. He really lost. There is actually such a person in this world? It wasn't an easy thing to win against Rong Xiu. Of course there is. Rong Xiu's smile deepened. However, there was a tinge of extremely faint gentleness in his eyes. However, if we were to meet again now, my chances of winning would be higher. Knock knock. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Come in. Rong Xiu said indifferently. Yan Qing walked in and bowed to the two of them one after another before saying, Your Highness, 36 respected Elder Ming. The people from the Ming tribe are here. They want to see 36 respected Elder Ming. The Ming tribe was one of the tribes. It was also the clan that 36 respected Elder Ming came from. Because of 36 respected Elder Ming, the Ming tribe's status wasn't low. However, 36 respected Elder Ming's expression changed. He immediately became impatient. Why are they here again? Didn't I say that this old man is very busy and told them not to disturb this old man's business? Yan Qing lowered her head and said respectfully, Respected Elder, after you came out of seclusion this time, they sent people over. But at that time, you were busy discussing important matters with the other revered elders, so you didn't get to meet him. Now that they've heard that you've finally returned from your travels, they've specially rushed over. These bastards definitely didn't have any good intentions. It's fine if I don't meet him. Go back and tell them that this old man is in seclusion. I don't have time to see them recently. Every time they asked to see him, nothing good ever came out of it. Who knew why they were here this time? One had to know that not long ago, Rong Xiu had personally led an army to wipe out a division. Weren't they just looking for trouble by coming here at such a sensitive time? Missing. They were all gone. Yan Qing hesitated for a moment and said, Respected Elder, the news of you and His Highness playing chess for a few days has already spread outside. They also know about it. Otherwise, how would those people dare to block him here? 36 respected Elder Ming was extremely frustrated. Seeing his reaction, Yan Qing knew that it was best for her not to say anything else. But she had to say those words. In the end, she could only bite the bullet and say, They also said that they'll continue to wait for you here. Whenever you're done with your work, you can just meet them. 36 respected Elder Ming was so angry that he blew his beard and glared. In the end, he could only leave. From the looks of it, Those people from the Ming division couldn't avoid being reprimanded again. A long time after he left, Rong Xiu sat up straight. He moved his wrist, and a crystal barrier appeared on the chessboard. Sunlight shone in from the window and shone on the crystal-clear crystal barrier. It was bright and moving. Then, there was the second one. Then, there was the third one. Rong Xiu took out a total of 6 crystal barriers and placed them in a row on the chessboard. He looked at the crystal barriers in front of him and laughed softly. I didn't expect it to be so fast. I've refined so many for nothing. He refined these crystal barriers according to different levels and wanted to give them to her gradually. But when he knew that she was planning to go to the Tianling dynasty, he was worried and gave her that one directly. What he didn't expect was that she would actually. Rong Xiu's thin lips curled up. Actually, this was within reason. After all, it was originally hers. It caused these glass worlds to have no place to be used. Yan Qing stood at the side and quickly raised his eyes to take a look. He saw that his master had waved his sleeves and those crystal barriers were silently turned into dust. A light breeze blew, and those flying dust instantly flew up. Then it dissipated. She quickly lowered her head. Master had spent a lot of effort to refine these crystal barriers. Now, they were all destroyed. Could it be that Miss Lu Yu's sighed, "Keep all these"? Rong Xiu said lightly, "Yes." Yan Qing hurriedly went forward. Looking at the faint marks left on the chessboard, she faintly felt her heart ache. These were all top-grade crystal barriers made with the best materials and personally refined by her master. If they were released, who knew how many people would be willing to go bankrupt just to get one? What a pity, what a pity. She had followed her master for so many years, but the number of times she saw her master personally refining yuan instruments was few and far between. And most of them were for Miss Lu Yu. Her actions were clean and nimble. She quickly cleaned up the chessboard and retreated. When she reached the door, Yan Qing paused for a moment and asked again, "Your Highness, the people from the Ming division, don't you plan to meet them?" Those people from the Ming division had always been restless. No one knew why they were here this time. Although 36 respected elder Ming was suppressing them, they were his clan after all. He was often restrained because of this. Rong Xiu laughed lazily and said casually, "They asked to meet 36 respected elder Ming. After killing the chicken to warn the monkey, the other divisions were much more well-behaved. Even if they wanted to cause trouble, they had to reconsider their own abilities. Moreover, with 36 respected elder Ming around, they couldn't cause trouble." Yan Qing lowered his head and replied, "Yes, I will take my leave." After speaking, he respectfully retreated. After closing the door, the room fell into silence again. After a while, Rong Xiu looked in front of him. "Come out." A huge white figure flashed past. It was Xue Xue. She walked in front of Rong Xiu and lay on the ground. Only a pair of icy blue eyes stared at Rong Xiu. She looked very lovable and lovable, which was a rare sight. God knows how much she had been holding it in during this period of time. She missed her so much. Bah. Rong Xiu glanced at her indifferently. "You seem to think that this move will work on anyone?" Xue Xue's expression froze. The paw that was about to act coquettishly froze in midair. She didn't know how to continue. After being stunned for a while, she angrily retracted her paw. She angrily tilted her head to the side and let out a whimper. She wanted a warm and soft hug. Rong Xiu's gaze turned cold. "Dream on." "Xue Xue," Rong Xiu continued. "But I forgot to tell you. She has found little 9. Xue Xue suddenly raised her head and opened her eyes wide. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 751. On Rong Xiu's elegant face, there was a faint smile on his lips as if he was talking about a small matter that had nothing to do with him. However, Xue Xue was very clear that his expression, what he said, must be true. Many complicated emotions flashed through Xue Xue's eyes, and it let out a low whimper. It first got up and seemed to want to go out, but after taking 2 steps, it came back and lay down beside Rong Xiu's feet. Of course, it was happy. After all, Its relationship with Little Nine had always been very deep. But it felt a little lost in its heart. Thinking that Little Nine could be with it every day after it went back, Shui was very envious. Rong Xiu glanced at it from the corner of his eyes. Seeing that it was tired, he said casually, "Also, it has already broken through to become a divine beast." Shui raised its head and lay down lazily again. So what if it was a divine beast? It was as if it wasn't. Rong Xiu smiled and finally added the last fatal sentence. "Its level is higher than yours." "Awoo!" Shui was immediately provoked and looked at Rong Xiu in disbelief. Looking at Rong Xiu's silent smile, Shui immediately understood that what he said was true. Shui was very hurt. It turned around and jumped out of the window. "Awoo, cultivate! I can't lose." The soldiers in charge of guarding outside heard the sound and looked over in surprise. What happened to His Highness's magical beast? Shui's figure flashed and disappeared from everyone's sight. Yanqing, who had just walked outside, couldn't help but look up and shook her head sympathetically. It seemed that it was provoked by Master again. Mystic Forest. Chu Luiyue was wearing a pure gold sacred armor, blocking all the violent turbulence in the surroundings. Although they hadn't seen each other for a long time, this familiar feeling hadn't changed. Chu Luiyue was happy in his heart, but he still couldn't figure out the mystery of Rong Xiu and the colored glass world. In the end, Chu Luiyue gritted his teeth. "The next time they meet, I must ask him face to face." All of a sudden, the surrounding light began to ripple like water. Chu Luiyue looked down and vaguely saw that the light seemed to be coming from something. It was just that she was still unable to see clearly due to the surrounding light. But the closer he got, the heavier the pressure became. Dumpling's movements gradually slowed down. Clearly, she was also being suppressed. Finally, one man and one beast landed. Chu Luiyue jumped down from Dumpling's back. With the protection of the pure gold sacred armor, this power and pressure would not pose any threat to her. Therefore, her movements were more agile. Dumpling had a few more wounds on her body, but fortunately, they were all superficial wounds and had already begun to heal. The bloodline power in its body was extremely strong, so its recovery ability naturally increased as well. Chu Luiyue felt more at ease as she surveyed her surroundings. This place seemed to be just a simple cave. The walls were chiseled, and the ground beneath his feet was hard and uneven, not black mud. In the middle, there was a protruding rock. The rock's shape was irregular, and only the top seemed to have been flattened by something, making it smooth and clean. There's a piece of crystal on top. That crystal was about the size of an adult man's 2 palms. It was about an inch thick and had an irregular shape. It was glowing with a rich and clear green color like jade. As the light emitted from above was surging upwards, the space at the bottom wasn't affected much. Chu Luiyue stared closely at that piece of crystal and vaguely saw a few broken runes on it. Could that be the broken seal that Qini mentioned previously? As Chu Luiyue was thinking, she saw the runes on it floating gently. The light on the crystal also swayed as gently as water ripples. Chu Luiyue took a step forward. Suddenly, she felt that the origin power in her body seemed to have become restless. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. She then realized that this crystal was actually absorbing the surrounding energy. The terrifying suction force that she felt just now was coming from above. She clenched her teeth and continued walking forward. Dumpling originally wanted to stop her, but after some thought, she didn't say anything and just followed closely behind her. At the same time, she handed something over. Chu Luiyue turned around and realized that it was the black shield that she took from Shengguan previously. I shouldn't say that, because this black shield was hers to begin with. Chu Luiyue took the black shield, and a hint of nostalgia flashed across her face. This black shield actually had a long history. Because of this, she found it together with the pure gold armor back then. At first, Chu Luiyue thought that the armor and shield were a pair, but she later realized that wasn't the case. The pure gold armor quickly recognized its owner, and that was how she learned its name. However, she tried many methods to awaken this black shield, but she still couldn't. Thus, she didn't even know its name until now. However, even if she didn't inject her force and didn't recognize its owner, the defense of this black shield was still extremely strong. Therefore, Chu Liyue had always carried it with her and would only use it when she encountered a dangerous battle. The world only knew that the pure gold armor was a rare treasure, and the Empress relied on this armor to win every battle. But they didn't know that at least half of the credit belonged to this black shield. Actually, in Chu Liyue's heart, she had always thought that the level of this black shield might be stronger than the pure gold armor. Because until she broke through to the 8th rank warrior, she was still unable to move this black shield. Without any assistance, the power of this thing was still not inferior to the pure gold armor. If it really recognized its owner, she wondered how powerful it would be. Shangguan only thought that this black shield was useful and didn't take it to heart. Previously, when the black shield was snatched away, although she was furious, it was only because her item was snatched away and not because she felt that she had lost a treasure. If she knew the true power of this black shield in the future, she would probably regret it so much that her intestines would turn green. Chu Liyue placed the black shield in front of her and walked forward. With this layer of protection, that terrifying suction force was indeed blocked outside. Chu Liyue gradually got closer and stopped when she was 5 steps away from the crystal. She then looked at it intently. From here, she could basically see the appearance of the crystal stone clearly. Suddenly, Chu Liyue's eyes focused. In the middle of the crystal stone, there was a shuttle-like thing the size of a fingernail. Chu Liyue frowned with uncertainty. It seemed to be a seed? It's actually the origin slaughtering sacred seed? A voice filled with shock sounded. Chu Liyue turned her head. Taizu, you recognize this thing? What is the origin slaughtering sacred seed? She had never heard of it before. Taizu stared at the crystal stone with disbelief on his face. After a while, he said, I do recognize it. Many years ago, I saw it once, but at that time, he had seen it in the hands of a great expert. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 752. Logically speaking, it was absolutely impossible for this thing to appear here. This was because the power of space here could not withstand the pressure of the 2 Tian baby at all. He had once seen with his own eyes that the Almighty had used a heaven-wrecking holy seed to easily destroy a dynasty. That was right. It was a dynasty. An existence like the Tianling dynasty. It was not hard to imagine how terrifying this thing was. It was the first time that Chu Liyue had seen Taizu with such an expression on his face. In fact, one could see some clues from the name. 2 Tian baby. What kind of thing dared to have such a presumptuous name? Chu Liyue had read countless books, and she had even read many unique ancient books. However, she had never heard of this name before. Looking at Taizu's appearance, it must be very powerful. This thing can't be explained in a sentence or two. You only need to know that this thing is extremely powerful and also extremely dangerous. Taizu looked at Chu Liyue with a grave expression. We can't stay here. We must leave as soon as possible. Chu Liyue frowned slightly and looked up. How could they get out? Only then did Taizu realize that Chu Liyue had been dragged down by this thing. It would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens if they wanted to go back. He sighed deeply and frowned. Looking at this thing now, it seemed to be very calm. It should be because it was trapped by the crystal outside. But who knew when it would come out? When that time came, even he would not be able to save Chu Liyue. Seeing Taizu's worried look, Chu Liyue was not particularly worried. She tried to persuade Taizu, don't worry too much. Maybe we can find a way to leave soon. Taizu sighed in his heart. This girl still did not know how terrifying the power of the 2 Tian baby was. If this was an ordinary situation, why would he be so worried? He did not know who had placed the seal on it. Now that the seal had broken, he was afraid that. Chu Liyue took a few steps back and sat cross-legged on the flat ground at the edge of the cliff. She held the black shield in front of her. Taizu looked at her in confusion. Luyu, what are you doing? Chu Liyue put her hands on her knees and smiled. Thinking won't solve any problems. It's better to take advantage of this time to cultivate. This place may be dangerous, but the energy of heaven and earth is very rich. The speed of cultivation is several times faster than in the outside. Taizu was dumbfounded. This was a matter of life and death. Why was this girl still thinking about these things? In such a short period of time, if he were to cultivate desperately, how much could he improve? He really didn't know whether to say that she was fearless because she didn't know, or that she had gone crazy from cultivating. Shangguan Jing held his forehead when he saw Chu Liwei slowly close her eyes and really plan to start cultivating. Taizu. He really couldn't do anything to this girl. He looked back at the 2-Tian baby and walked over to Chu Liwei, resigned to his fate. If something really happened, the girl would be safer with him in front of her. Chu Liwei opened her eyes and looked at the translucent figure standing in front of her. Her eyes welled up with tears, and a warm current seemed to surge in her heart. Taizu, thank you. She said word by word seriously. Taizu turned around and looked at her with a deep gaze. Chu Liwei was confused by this gaze. She unconsciously stopped her back and asked tentatively, "What do you mean?" Taizu? Taizu smiled bitterly, shook his head, and sighed, but his expression was extremely gentle. Isn't it natural for me to protect my juniors? Chu Liwei was stunned on the spot. Her mind went blank. Taizu knew? When did he know? She had never said. Seeing Chu Liwei's expression, the last trace of doubt in Taizu's heart was completely eliminated. As expected, Chu Liwei was really his bloodline. There seemed to be waves surging in the depths of his eyes as countless complicated emotions surged within. He had so many questions to ask her, but when they reached the tip of his tongue, he couldn't say anything. After a while, Chu Liwei finally reacted and said hesitantly, "Taizu, what do you mean by that, Ling Xiaopom?" Seeing that Chu Liwei still refused to admit it, Taizu smiled and shook his head. Ling Xiaopom can't be practiced by anyone who isn't a member of the Tianling dynasty's royal family. You, on the other hand, performed the 3rd level, didn't you? Chu Liwei suddenly understood. So that was it. At that time, she had only thought that Shangguan Wan hadn't seen the 3rd level of Ling Xiaopom, so she had simply made a move. However, she had forgotten that this palm technique was created by Taizu. Even if she had only sketched an outline and hadn't really performed it, Taizu's eyesight was extraordinary. From then on, the great ancestor should have guessed something, right? Being suddenly exposed like this, Chu Liwei felt a little embarrassed for a moment. Thinking of the various disguises she had used to deceive Taizu, she didn't know how to face it. Taizu just looked at her quietly, his eyes kind. After a while, Chu Liwei stood up. She looked deeply at Taizu, the corners of her eyes slightly red. Then she lifted the hem of her clothes, knelt down, and bowed her head to kowtow. Unfilial descendant Shangguan Yu greets Taizu. Chu Liwei was trapped, and the crowd outside was about to go crazy from anxiety. Lei Laosi, Mu Hongyu, and the rest searched seriously, and they had to confirm every face over and over again, afraid that they would miss something. However, even after they had checked all the people who were chased out, they still didn't find any traces of Chu Liwei. Lei Laosi was almost in despair as he stared at the rapidly withering mother tree in a daze. Could it be that Her Highness really, Laosi, come back? Qin Yi suddenly spoke. Lei Laosi turned around in a daze. Qin Yi shook his head silently. Since we've already searched one round and can't find Her Highness, then she must be trapped down there. Big brother, Lei Laosi wasn't willing to move. We didn't protect Her Highness well in the past, and I didn't expect it to be the same this time. I only hate that I can't take Her Highness's place to suffer. If I could use my life to exchange for Her Highness's life, I definitely wouldn't have any objections. Qin Yi knew that once he became stubborn, even 9 bulls couldn't pull him back. Thus, he decided not to persuade him and just looked at Chang Wanzhou at the side. Are you sure? Chang Wanzhou nodded. I can confirm that she's still alive. It's just that I can't find her location in such a short period of time. There seems to be an extremely strong force under this mystic forest that isolates everything. Qin Yi felt more at ease. My instincts also feel that Her Highness is fine, but if this drags on, it'll be hard to say. We must save her, but these people here, are really troublesome. He looked at Shangguan. At this moment, Shangguan was standing rooted to the ground in a daze, and her eyes were filled with shock. What happened just now? The pure gold armor actually turned into powder and completely disappeared. It was clearly fine just now. How did this happen? Quite a few people around saw this scene, and at this moment, they all quietened down and had different expressions. Amidst the embarrassing silence, a questioning voice that seemed to be suppressing something was clearly heard. Did the third princess break Her Highness pure gold sacred armor? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 753. This sentence was very cold and harsh, like a sharp thorn that directly pierced through the dead silence. Shangguan looked in the direction of the voice and frowned. The person who spoke was a black cavalry soldier wearing armor. His face and body were covered in blood, and he was currently staring at her. His gaze was as cold as a knife, dense with anger that was about to burst out. Shangguan's expression instantly turned cold. Who do you think you are? How dare you question this princess like this? Who gave a mere black cavalry soldier the courage to speak to her with such a tone and expression? Even an important official in the imperial court wouldn't dare to not give her face like this. That soldier straightened his neck and continued speaking. This lowly one is a black cavalry lieutenant, Zhuang. This lowly one isn't questioning your highness, it's just a question. The pure gold armor was the crown princess's personal armor when she was alive, and it hasn't been broken after hundreds of battles. Now that it's being used by the third princess, it hasn't been through any battles, yet it's been directly destroyed. Third princess, don't you intend to explain? Shangguan was so angry that she laughed. The crown princess? Shangguan Yu couldn't be more dead, and now the entire Tianling dynasty was under her, Shangguan's control. She even killed Shangguan Yu, so what if she used her armor? Not to mention a mere black cavalry lieutenant, even in the entire Tianling dynasty, no one had the right to question her like this. It's just a piece of armor, why should this princess give you an explanation? She looked deeply at Zhuang, then spoke lightly to Mu Qinghe. Vice Admiral Mu, this is the soldier you're leading? Isn't this too unruly? She didn't even need to personally deal with this kind of reckless person. With just a word, Mu Qinghe would have to deal with him. However, the expected scene didn't happen. Mu Qinghe's face was expressionless, but her chin was somewhat tense, as if covered with a layer of frost. This is indeed an item that Empress Concubine treasured greatly when she was alive. The third princess might not know this, but to the soldiers of the Black Cavalry, this pure gold sacred armor had an extraordinary meaning. Now that it has been destroyed, the last general knows that you didn't do it on purpose, but please give everyone an explanation. Shangguan was shocked. Mu Qinghe, what is the meaning of this? Did he want her to explain or apologize? Just for a pure gold armor? Mu Qinghe met her gaze, her eyes firm and persistent. It was obvious that he wasn't going to let the matter rest. Shangguan trembled with anger. The pure gold sacred armor suddenly shattered. She also didn't know what was going on. She didn't even have time to feel sorry for herself, yet she had to explain herself to these people? What a joke! She looked at Jiang Yuqing angrily. Mu Qinghe was his woman. However, Jiang Yuqing seemed to be in a daze. No one knew what he was thinking. Shangguan called him twice before he came back to his senses. However, there was still a hint of disappointment and worry in his eyes. Shangguan rarely saw him like this, and she felt uneasy. But the most important thing now was still the pure gold sacred armor. After Jiang Yuqing reacted, he frowned and looked at Shangguan. What kind of powerful treasure was the pure gold sacred armor? It had always been fine. Why did it suddenly shatter when Shangguan wore it? Shangguan was infuriated by his glare. However, considering that there were still many people watching, she could only swallow her anger. Jiang Yuqing also cared about each other's face and didn't say anything in front of Mu Qinghe. The third princess has just experienced a life-and-death situation and is still in shock. Although the pure gold sacred armor is important, it's not as important as her. You are the Black Cavalry. You know best what your first priority is. Don't forget your identity. These words were very serious. If it was in the past, Mu Qinghe would definitely not continue to say anything. But it was different this time. Mu Qinghe's expression didn't change as she said calmly, "Eldest young master, it's precisely because we are all Black Cavalry that we are very insistent on this matter. Even if I don't ask, they will ask until they get a reasonable explanation." Jiang Yucheng frowned and looked at the Black Cavalry around him. Sure enough, those soldiers had already gathered around and were looking over here. Moreover, their expressions were stubborn, exactly the same as Tian Zhuangzhuang, who asked first. It was as if they wouldn't leave if Shangguan didn't explain. The atmosphere was heavy. There was dead silence. At this point, Shangguan finally realized that something was amiss, and a hint of panic flashed across her eyes. "What are you planning to do? Are you trying to rebel?" Mu Qinghe said, "The third princess is too serious." "Third princess, you're being too serious. They just want an explanation from you." "Explanation? What explanation do they need?" Ever since Shangguan took over power, she had never been so aggrieved. Previously, these people had clearly obeyed her every word. But just because she had destroyed a pure gold armor, they actually turned their backs on her. Extremely arrogant and presumptuous. When Qin Yi saw this scene from afar, a cold smile appeared on his lips. How would Shangguan, who had grown up in Xiling City with a silver spoon in her mouth, understand that military power had always been independent of imperial power? Back then, how many Black Cavalry did Her Highness risk her life to save? On the surface, this military power seemed to belong to Mu Qinghe. But in reality, it belonged to Her Highness. It was fine if they didn't mention it normally, but now that Shangguan destroyed the pure gold sacred armor, it was no different from stepping on everyone's bottom line. They naturally wouldn't let her off so easily. Shangguan clenched her fists tightly and almost crushed her teeth. "Shangguan Yu is dead, but I'm still restricted by her everywhere." She angrily said, "It's just a piece of scrap metal. So what if it's gone? What's there to explain?" The moment she said that, murderous intent rose from all directions. "Third princess, please be careful with your words." Digression. Tomorrow at 12 a.m. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from AI Web. Chapter 754. These words came out of Mu Qinghe's mouth. Shangguan looked at him in shock. Did Mu Qinghe know who he was talking to? But immediately, she felt that the atmosphere around her seemed to have changed. She looked around and saw that the Black Cavalry were all looking at her, their eyes full of suppressed anger. These were all soldiers who had experienced life and death on the battlefield, and they all carried a strong murderous aura. It was fine when they were restrained, but once they exploded, it was shockingly terrifying. Even someone as tough as Shangguan felt a trace of fear in her heart. She even had a faint premonition that if she really angered these people, she might not even be able to walk out of the mystic forest. The way these people looked at her didn't seem like they were looking at the high and mighty third princess, but more like they were looking at an ignorant person who didn't know what was good for her. Elder Qiushi sensed that something was wrong and immediately stepped forward and said angrily, "Vice Admiral Mu, are you threatening the third princess?" Mu Qinghe looked at him coldly, his eyes full of undisguised murderous intent. Elder Qiushi's heart thumped, and a trace of fear suddenly appeared. His old face trembled, and he unconsciously took half a step back. Mu Qinghe was a high-ranking general of the Tianling dynasty, and he was also the famous god of slaughter. His style of doing things was straightforward and his methods were fierce. Over the years, countless people had died at his hands. He had been very low-key for more than a year, so much so that Elder Qiushi almost forgot what a terrifying person he was. Until now, when he met Mu Qinghe's cold and stern eyes, he suddenly remembered that he couldn't afford to offend this person. In addition to his own strength, he also led tens of thousands of loyal Black Cavalry. He was just an elder of the imperial family. Although his title sounded good, how could he be a match for Mu Qinghe? Thinking of this, Elder Qiushi was terrified. Shangguan was angry, and her body trembled slightly as she looked at Elder Qiushi. Useless thing. Jiang Yuqing originally wanted to speak up for Shangguan, but in the current situation, if she didn't lower her head, it wouldn't be easy. What if? His voice grew more serious. Shangguan bit her lips as her emotions churned. Finally, she gritted her teeth and said, "That pure gold armor was fine before, but it suddenly shattered. I don't know what happened either. Many people were there just now. There should be many people who can prove that I didn't do anything." The pure gold armor suddenly shattered by itself. Jiang Yuqing nodded. "That's right. That's what I saw." Soon after, a few more people gave the same response. However, many of the black cavalry soldiers were not satisfied with this explanation. What kind of explanation was this? Whispers of discussion could be heard from the crowd. Her Highness the Empress concubine has worn the pure gold sacred armor so many times without any problems. The third princess only wore it once and it was directly damaged? That's right. Although Her Highness the Empress concubine is no longer around, this is her relic after all. The third princess used it just like that. It's fine if she used it properly, but now that the pure gold sacred armor is completely damaged and doesn't leave any traces, the third princess doesn't feel guilty at all. Instead, she's so self-righteous. Although everyone had lowered their voices, the people nearby could hear them. This was especially so for Shangguan, who heard it clearly. Wasn't this equivalent to criticizing her in front of her? These black cavalry soldiers were too much. Shangguan took a deep breath and suppressed the anger in her heart with great difficulty. She could already tell that these black cavalry soldiers respected Shangguan very much. She couldn't do anything to them in a short period of time. The pure gold sacred armor was already gone. She couldn't lose more because of this. If she really angered these people, who knew what they would do? Her tone finally softened. "I naturally know that the pure gold sacred armor is an extremely precious item to my elder sister. It's also because of this that I took it out again. If my elder sister's spirit is in heaven, she definitely wouldn't want to see the pure gold sacred armor placed on a shelf, right? This consort personally believes that an item like this should only be used to its fullest potential. I just didn't expect such a thing to happen this time. Just now, I also went through a few life and death situations, so I was a little emotional for a moment. What I said just now wasn't intentional. This consort already feels extremely remorseful for breaking eldest sister's things." Shangguan's voice even sounded a little choked as she spoke. Not to mention other things, her acting skills were still very good. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to reach her current position. Tianzhuang turned his face away with a hint of disdain in his eyes. Only a brainless person would believe Shangguan's explanation. If she hadn't been forced to this extent, she would probably still be as arrogant as before. Like Tianzhuang, most of the black cavalry soldiers disdained Shangguan's words. Jiang Yuqing came out to smooth things over. "All right, let's end this matter here for now. Right now, it's more important to leave this mystic forest first." Half of the leaves on that mother tree had already withered and fallen. It wouldn't be long before it completely withered. When those Yeshan withered, the entire mystic forest was almost turned upside down. Who knew what the consequences would be if something happened to this mother tree? Mu Qinghe also glanced at the mother tree and nodded gently. "Soldiers of the Black Cavalry, listen up. Gather." Mu Qinghe gave the order and immediately received everyone's response. All the soldiers ran one after another and lined up neatly in a short while. There were also people who were seriously injured who were taken care of by the side. On the battlefield, they had encountered situations that were several times more tragic than this. It was naturally not a problem to deal with such a situation. Mu Qinghe glanced around. "All captains, report the number of survivors." Tianzhuang straightened his back. "Reporting, first squad of the Black Cavalry, 63 survivors. When they arrived, there were a total of 10 squads. Each squad had 100 soldiers and was led by a captain. Out of 100 people, 63 survived. The casualties could be said to be heavy. The other captains also reported the situation of their squads. Among them, 4 captains of the squads died. With every sentence, Mu Qinghe's face turned colder. Although he had roughly guessed this number before, when he heard the confirmation, his heart still wavered. With every sentence, the surrounding atmosphere became more and more solemn. By the time the last person finished speaking, the entire forest had fallen silent. Before they came, the Black Cavalry had 1,000 people. Now, only 617 of them were left. Nearly 400 of them were rescued by Chu Luiyue and the others. Without them, the consequences would be even more unimaginable. They had only entered the mystic forest once, and almost half of them had died. The situation of the other sects was not much better. Basically, 1/3 of them had died. At this moment, Shangguan said, "We can't stay here anymore. Let's go to the Mirror Lake." Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 755. Once she said that, she immediately attracted all kinds of gazes. Even Jiang Yuqing frowned and looked at her disapprovingly. We're all heavily injured now. The most important thing is to leave as soon as possible. I'm afraid it's not appropriate to go to Mirror Lake now, right? Shangguan pressed her lips together and knitted her brows. But we haven't found any of the herbs we wanted for father. If I return to Xiling empty-handed like this, I don't know how the world will criticize and ridicule me. Besides, my Yuan meridian hasn't fully recovered yet. Once I return to Xiling, it won't be as easy as here. I'm just 1 step away. I'm definitely not willing to give up just like that. Also, even though an accident happened in the Mystic Forest, it might not be the same in Mirror Lake. The Huang Swamp is vast and boundless. If we only come to the Mystic Forest once and leave without finding anything, then what's the point of this trip? Jiang Yuqing was silent for a moment. Although he knew that whatever Shangguan said and did now was for herself, what she said was not without reason. Back then, everyone in Xiling knew that they came in such a grandiose manner. If they returned just like that, it would indeed be hard to say. After thinking for a long time, he could only agree. Okay, then we'll go to Mirror Lake next. However, if we encounter such danger again, we must immediately leave the Huang Swamp without hesitation. Shangguan naturally agreed. Since the 2 people with the highest statuses had decided on this matter, the rest had to comply even if they didn't want to. At this point, the Mystic Forest's periphery had stopped collapsing. Even though the ground was uneven, it could still allow everyone to leave successfully. After the crowd, Mu Hongyu and the rest didn't move as they stood beside Qin Yi with worried expressions. "Big brother Qin, can you find where Lu Yu is now?" Qin Yi pondered for a moment and shook his head lightly. "There's a force below blocking everything outside, so I can't investigate. However, I can confirm that the force came from the mother tree. So, it definitely has something to do with the Mystic Forest becoming like this." Yi Ran clasped his hands and asked worriedly, "Then, could Lu Yu be under the mother tree? If we go down, will we be able to find her?" Qin Yi sighed softly. If only things were that simple. In fact, he was already certain that Chu Luiyue was indeed under the mother tree. The powerful energy that had spread out should have been released after the seal had been broken. Since Chang Wanzhou was certain that Chu Luiyue was still alive, she was most likely there. However, he and Lei Laosi had stayed here for close to 2 years, and they didn't know what exactly was down there. Judging from the current situation, they wouldn't be able to break in any time soon, let alone find out. Lu Yu is still alive. A voice filled with shock and surprise was heard. They turned around. Senior brother Zhu Hong? Mu Hongyu quickly glanced at Zhu Hong. His injuries were basically fine, and there were still a few people standing behind him. They were all Dragon Teeth Mountain disciples. "You didn't follow them?" asked Mu Hongyu strangely. Zhu Hong shook his head. "Lu Yu saved our lives. How can we just leave like that?" He previously thought that Chu Luiyue was already dead, so he felt terrible for a long time. Seeing that Mu Hongyu and the rest were still standing there, he was curious and came over. In the end, he happened to hear them discussing how to find Chu Luiyue. Not mentioning other things, Qin Yi and Lei Laosi were very strong. If they believed that Chu Luiyue was still alive, then it shouldn't be wrong. He originally didn't want to believe that Chu Luiyue was dead. Now that he heard that there was still hope, he naturally wanted to search for her. Then, Zhu Hong looked at Qin Yi and bowed solemnly. He could tell that Qin Yi was the strongest among them and was also the backbone of the group. The most important thing was that Qin Yi was willing to help find Chu Luiyue. Young Master Qin, we know that we're weak and injured, so we can't help much. However, Luyu did us a huge favor, and we'll definitely repay him. If you have any requests, just let us know. As long as we can help even a little, we'll be happy. Qin Yi glanced at him, and his gaze became gentler, but he still shook his head. I understand your intentions, but this place is really dangerous. But this place is indeed dangerous. You can't stay here. The faces of Zhu Hong and the others were filled with disappointment. The hidden force below is extremely scary. Once it explodes, even fourth brother and I might not be able to protect you. If something really happens, wouldn't it be a waste of her efforts to save you? Qin Yi's tone was very calm, but every word he said was like a stone that heavily smashed into everyone's hearts. Zhu Hong laughed bitterly. He understood that Qin Yi's words were very tactful. All of them were more or less injured. I'm not afraid of not being able to help. I'm just afraid that I'll become a burden instead. After thinking for a while, Zhu Hong sighed. Young Master Qin is right. I'll leave the matter of finding Luyu to you. Qin Yi nodded lightly. These few people from Dragon Teeth Mountain have good characters and are more sensible. It can be seen that Jian Shai taught them well. On the other hand, Song Qingyan hurriedly left with Shengguan Wan and the rest when he heard that this place was dangerous. Zhu Hong looked at Mu Hongyu. Originally, he wanted to persuade Mu Hongyu to leave with them, but he thought that she was close friends with Chu Luiyue and definitely wouldn't be willing to leave. Thus, he didn't say that. Hongyu, you guys be careful. Mu Hongyu isn't injured and has a faint yuan body. She might really be able to help Qin Yi and the rest. Mu Hongyu nodded. Senior brothers and senior sisters, be careful. Very quickly, Zhu Hong and the rest also left with the group. Only Qin Yi and the rest were left on the spot. The mother tree was still rapidly withering. After walking for some distance, Shengguan Wan looked back and vaguely saw that there were still a few people standing there without moving. She narrowed her eyes. Qin Yi and Lei Laosi aren't our people, so it's normal for them not to leave with us. However, why are the others still waiting there? Jiang Yuqing followed her line of sight and looked back, frowning slightly. What are they doing there? Shengguan Wan sneered in her heart. Are they still waiting for Chu Luiyue to come back from the dead? Digression, I'm about to turn into a raisin, make up at 6 p.m. Also, mobile users with today's update, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from LoveWeb. Chapter 756. They probably don't want to believe the truth and want to continue searching for Chu Luiyue's traces. Shengguan Wan said nonchalantly, but her eyes were filled with disdain and mockery. Jiang Yuqing saw her expression, and a tinge of impatience and disgust rose in his heart. His expression also became much colder as he looked at Mu Qinghe. They came together after all. How can we leave them behind alone? Go and call them back. Mu Qinghe's brows moved slightly, and a tinge of surprise flashed across her eyes. Jiang Yuqing doesn't seem to have a good relationship with Chongshu Pavilion. Why is he concerned about the lives of our disciples at this time? This really doesn't match his usual style of doing things. As she was too shocked, Mu Qinghe paused for a moment before nodding. The last general will. Why do you care about them? Shengguan Wan suddenly spoke and interrupted Mu Qinghe. As if realizing that her words were a little inappropriate, her expression changed slightly as she coughed and added a few more sentences. Oh, what I mean is that their hearts and minds are filled with finding Chu Luiyue. It's useless for anyone to persuade them. They might even end up being blamed in the end. Even though they came together, this is what they want to do. Outsiders have no right to interfere, right? She looked at Jiang Yuqing meaningfully and seemingly smiled. Yuqing, I know you have good intentions, but sometimes, good intentions often lead to bad things. Anyway, with Qin Yi and Lei Laosi around, nothing will happen to them. They might even want to follow Qin Yi and Lei Laosi. But in this Dahuang swamp, it's really dangerous for a few people to be alone. Jiang Yuqing knitted his brows. Why don't we send a portion of the Black Cavalry and go together with them? Together with what? Shang Guanwan cut him off as if she was joking. Yuqing, don't tell me you want to find Chu Luiyue too? We know you. We know you're doing this for their own good. But in the eyes of those who don't know what's going on, that might not necessarily be the case. You don't want to be misunderstood, do you? The fire in Jiang Yuqing's chest arched, and he finally suppressed it with great difficulty. I got it. What you said makes sense. Just let them be. Only then did Shang Guanwan stop and lower her eyes. However, the bottom of her heart was not so calm. She had deliberately mentioned Chu Luiyue just now to test him. She could clearly see the panic in Jiang Yuqing's eyes for a moment. Why was he panicking? Shang Guanwan walked forward step by step, but her body was tense and her hands were tightly clenched. Her face was covered with a veil, and there were scars on her face, so it was not easy for others to see her expression. However, the aura around her was extremely cold. She had long suspected that Jiang Yuqing had feelings for Chu Luiyue, and now it seemed that it was true. If it were someone else, he would definitely not say a word. Was it just because of the somewhat similar eyebrows? Shang Guanwan was unconvinced and unwilling to accept it. Although the two of them had killed Shang Guanyu together, she knew that many years ago, Jiang Yuqing did indeed like Shanghai Yu. However, for some reason, it seemed that his attitude toward Shanghai Yu changed overnight. Until now, she still did not know why. She had never asked. Jiang Yuqing also liked her, but this kind of like was different from the kind of like he used to like Shanghai Yu. She knew that once she asked, many things would be different. She was not that stupid. Besides, Shanghai Yu was dead after all. What was the point of arguing with a dead person? However, this time, Jiang Yuqing felt that familiar uneasiness toward Chu Luiyue. Shang Guanwan glanced at Jiang Yuqing. He fell into deep thought again. No one knew what he was thinking. Along the way, he had lost count of how many times he had been like this. The people who could make him feel this way were Shanghai Yu and Chu Luiyue. Shang Guanwan wanted to flare up, but she suppressed it. In the end, both of them were dead. Just like that, Shang Guanwan secretly comforted herself for a long time before she finally calmed down. However, Jiang Yuqing, who was next to her, did not notice it at all. Or perhaps he noticed it, but he was too lazy to care. The two of them walked forward together, but they had different thoughts and did not speak. A few hours later, they finally walked out of the mystic forest and arrived at the border of Mirror Lake. Mirror Lake is up ahead, Mu Qinghe said in a low voice. Shang Guanwan perked up and looked forward. At this time, the sun was setting in the west. At the border where the water met the sky, large patches of clouds floated. Light pierced through the clouds and dyed half the sky a brilliant gold. Below, Mirror Lake was boundless, reflecting the scenery in the sky. At first glance, it looked like a huge mirror on the ground. Everyone quieted down. Such a scene could be considered as a paradise on Earth. I didn't expect the scenery of Mirror Lake to be so beautiful. Yeah. Just one look and I'm mesmerized. This is the most beautiful place I've seen in my life. It looks calm and peaceful. It doesn't seem as scary as the rumors say. Many disciples walked forward and looked at the scenery with intoxicated expressions. They praised it one after another. Compared to the purgatory-like mystic forest, this place was many times better. However, while they were immersed in the moving scenery of Mirror Lake, many of the Black Cavalry members looked tense. He seemed to be very nervous. Even Mu Qinghe was no exception. Your Highness, First Young Master, Mirror Lake looks peaceful, but it's actually as dangerous as the mystic forest. It's better to be careful. He originally wanted to say that Mirror Lake was more dangerous than the mystic forest, but after considering what happened in the mystic forest, he decided to put the two on the same level. Of the 3 places in Dahuang Swamp, this is the place with the highest number of deaths. Mu Qinghe's words made everyone quiet down. Many of the sect disciples who had previously yearned for the Mirror Lake were stunned when they heard this. They looked at each other in dismay. Shangguan was also surprised. Really? But Mirror Lake doesn't look like anything. Wait, what's that? Everyone followed her line of sight. In the middle of Mirror Lake, there was a flower breaking out of the water and rising slowly. It was a palm-sized flower with a total of 5 petals that were pink and white in color. Under the afterglow of the setting sun, it looked translucent. It looked magnificent and beautiful. When the breeze blew, it swayed gently. Elder Qiushi suddenly widened his eyes in shock. Isn't that the dancing lotus? Shangguan was pleasantly surprised. Elder Qiushi, are you sure that's the dancing lotus? It was rumored to be a top-grade medicinal herb that could revive the dead and regrow flesh and bones, the dancing lotus. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. As soon as he finished speaking, a look of despair appeared on their faces. Even young Master Qin can't do it? Yi Ran asked softly with reddened eyes. Qin Yi was the strongest among them. If he said that he couldn't do it, then Qin Yi sighed and looked at Chang Wanzhou. Do you know how she is now? Chang Wanzhou pressed his lips tightly together and shook his head. He was more sensitive than the average person. In addition, the Cloud Sky Copper Sword was personally made by him, so he could usually determine her position more quickly and accurately and know if she was dead or alive. However, he couldn't do more than that. Also, as Qin Yi said, there was indeed a force below that blocked everything outside, so they couldn't detect any movement at all. At this point, there was basically only a quarter of the leaves on the mother tree left. Qin Yi glanced at it and suddenly waved his sleeves to set up a barrier. The green barrier instantly enveloped Mu Hongyu and the rest. Compared to the previous barrier he set up, the aura this time was clearly much stronger. Mu Hongyu and the rest looked at each other in shock. Qin Yi's cultivation level seemed to be much stronger than what we imagined. He actually hid his true abilities previously. Laosi, stay here and look after them. I'll be back soon. Lei Laosi immediately said, Big brother, I'll go with you. Qin Yi shook his head. Nobody knew what would happen next, so it was better to be careful. These few people were all friends that Her Highness valued, so he naturally had to protect them well. Lei Laosi could only stay on the spot. Qin Yi walked forward. The withered leaves fell down and landed on his head and body. He raised his hand, picked up a leaf, and took a closer look. The originally emerald green leaf rapidly turned yellow and curled up within a few seconds. The energy and vitality contained in it seemed to have been sucked away by something. He knitted his brows and looked forward. A branch suddenly broke and fell from above. Without a doubt, that branch had also completely withered. Qin Yi glanced at it and was about to continue walking forward when he suddenly realized that a dark green glow seemed to have flashed across the spot where the branch broke. He took 2 steps closer and lowered his head to take a look. As expected, there was a faint dark green glow at the spot where the branch broke. His heart skipped a beat, and he waved his hand to cut off a branch. The branch fell at the same spot and in the same scene. Kacha! At this moment, a cracking sound was heard from the front. Qin Yi immediately looked up and saw that there was actually a crack on the extremely thick tree trunk. That crack was only the thickness of a finger and an inch long. Compared to the entire tree, it wasn't worth mentioning at all. However, very quickly, a dark green glow shone out from within. Deep underground, in the cave, the glow shone in all directions. The entire space was silent. That's roughly what happened. Chu Lue calmly explained her situation to Taizu briefly before kneeling down and kowtowing again. I hid a lot of things from Taizu previously, so please forgive me, Taizu. Taizu looked at her deeply, reached out, and gently caressed her hair as he sighed. Child, it's been hard on you. Digression, it's already a lousy February. It should be at 9 p.m. and will continue to be updated. Those who can't wait until tomorrow can also watch it. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 758. When Chu Lue talked about the past previously, She had always been very calm. Although those people and those things were like the sharpest blade, leaving the deepest and most painful scars on her. But now she could face it calmly. His tone was calm, and his expression was indifferent, as if he was talking about someone else. However, when Taizu said that sentence, Chu Liyue's nose twitched, and her eyes turned red. Those painful memories could no longer affect her in the slightest. She thought her heart was as hard as a rock. She didn't expect to be so easily defeated by Taizu's words. Although Taizu didn't have a physical body, Chu Liyue couldn't feel his caress. However, she seemed to have been comforted by something in an instant. A hole opened up in the dam that had been built high in her heart, allowing the countless suppressed emotions to surge out like a flood. Chu Liyue closed her eyes, and a hot tear fell silently. After a while, she raised her head and smiled at Taizu. Taizu's words were enough for Luyu. Taizu looked at the girl in front of him, his eyes full of pity. When he saw Chu Liyue perform the third level of the Lingxiao palm, countless conjectures flashed through his mind. But he still didn't expect her experience to be so rough and strange. He sighed and shook his head, and a trace of anger flashed across his face. I didn't expect that there would be such a despicable person in the Shangguan family. Shangguan Wan really doesn't deserve this name. He didn't take Shangguan Wan seriously before. He just felt that this junior was not generous enough and seemed to be quite scheming, so he didn't like her very much. But he didn't expect that she would do such a thing as killing her own clan and deceiving her superiors and subordinates. In order to get everything she wanted, she was really crazy. If the Tianling dynasty is really handed over to her, I'm afraid the consequences will be unimaginable. Perhaps the 1,000-year foundation of the Tianling dynasty will be destroyed in Shangguan Wan's hands. Chu Liyue said word by word, Taizu, don't worry. Don't worry, ancestor. With Liyue around, I definitely won't let her have her way. She will eventually pay the price for everything she has done. Taizu looked at Chu Liyue with a relieved expression. Fortunately, in the Shangguan family besides her, there's still a good child like you, Luyu. Suddenly thinking of something, the great ancestor suddenly laughed and said, No wonder I felt very close to you when I saw you. We are family. Back then, after he left the Tianling God realm with Chu Liyue, he was very curious about everything about the Tianling royal family. When Chu Liyue went to the palace to see Shangguan Wan, he had secretly tried to look at Shangguan Wan. In the end, he was greatly disappointed. In comparison, he still liked Chu Liyue more, so he had always been by her side. He gradually lost interest in the Tianling royal family. After going one round, it turned out that Chu Liyue was a member of the Shangguan family. Chu Liyue blinked. Taizu, it's good that you don't blame me. You don't know, but when you agreed to give me the Long Yuan sword, I almost wanted to confess to you. But the situation was urgent, and I didn't want to implicate you, so I didn't say it in the end. Please don't take offense. Taizu snorted. You are Shangguan Jing's junior. What can't you say? If I had known that Shangguan Wan and Jiang Yuqing had bullied you to this extent, I definitely wouldn't have let them off. His brows furrowed slightly. I don't even have enough time to feel sorry for you. How can I bear to blame you? Chu Liyue's heart warmed. The feeling of someone standing on the same side as her, unconditionally believing and supporting her, and willing to stand up for her, it was too beautiful and precious. The former Shangguan Yu had lost everything, and only her father was left. Furthermore, he had been poisoned and fell into a coma. Until today, it was difficult for her to even see him once. And now, Chu Liyue had elders who doted on her and trusted friends. There was also Rong Xiu, who would always place her at the top of his heart. Back then, I was willing to give you the Long Yuan sword for 2 reasons. Taizu's expression became much more serious. Chu Liyue subconsciously straightened her back. Firstly, the Long Yuan sword awakened and chose you as its new master. Although it's a Yuan instrument that I refined, it has its own intelligence. You should know that many people from the Tianling dynasty have entered the Tianling God realm over the years to ask for the Long Yuan sword, but they all failed in the end. And when you appeared, the Long Yuan sword reacted very quickly and woke up. It's not just me. It has also waited for 1,000 years for a new master that it likes. Now that it finally chose you, I naturally won't object. Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes and finally asked the question in her heart. Even so, you spent a lot of effort to refine the Long Yuan sword. You should have wanted to leave it for the Tianling royal family. But at that time, you didn't know my identity. Why did you still give it to me so straightforwardly? Chu Luiyue believed that if Taizu wanted to stop her, he would definitely be able to. But he didn't. Instead, he gave the Long Yuan sword to her very generously. Chu Luiyue couldn't figure this out no matter how hard she tried. If it was any other treasure, it would be fine if he gave it to an outsider. But this Long Yuan sword was a symbol of Taizu's identity and also an existence that was like a sacred item of the Tianling dynasty. Its significance was extraordinary. Taizu giving it to her so straightforwardly was really out of her expectations. This is the second point that I want to talk about. Taizu paused for a moment and looked at Chu Luiyue with a complicated gaze. You probably don't know yet, but inside the Black Pyramid in your body, there seems to be a bloodline power of the Tianling royal family. Digression: a wasted February was dragged to work by Mom, mobile users. Please browse and read at around 9:30 p.m. A better reading experience comes from Ijing. Chapter 759. Once he said that, Chu Luiyue was dazed. She looked at Taizu in a daze. What do you mean by that? Taizu looked into Chu Luiyue's eyes and said firmly. It means that there's the aura of a member of the Tianling royal family hidden inside. According to my guess, it's very likely to be a soul. Chu Luiyue's pupils constricted, and she almost blurted out. How is that possible? It's really very likely. Taizu put his hands behind his back with a solemn expression. If it's just a pure force, what's the point of locking it up like this? Do you still remember the scene when you flew down the crater and entered the space under the Long Yuan sword? Countless images flashed through Chu Luiyue's mind. Of course, she remembered. Everything that happened that day was still vivid in her mind. Do you know that I specially set up that space? Those who aren't from the Tianling royal family aren't allowed to enter. Taizu's words were like a heavy hammer that smashed Chu Luiyue's head hard. Her eyes suddenly lit up. That's right. When she jumped down the crater, sword aura was everywhere. At the crucial moment, the Black Pyramid flew out and opened the door, allowing her to enter. Later, a crack appeared on the seal of the Black Pyramid. At that time, I sensed that the aura inside was extremely familiar. At that time, I thought that the soul of a descendant of the Tianling royal family was sealed inside, so I agreed to give you the Long Yuan sword and leave the Tianling god realm with you. Taizu originally wanted to take the opportunity to attack the Black Pyramid again to see what secrets were hidden inside. In the end, that crack actually repaired itself. The aura inside was isolated again. With his current cultivation level and strength, it was really difficult to break that seal. Therefore, he put this matter aside for now. It wasn't until today that he confirmed Chu Luiyue's identity that he finally told her everything. Chu Luiyue listened bit by bit, and it was as if stormy waves had surged in her heart. She had guessed countless times what was hidden in the Black Pyramid, but she had never thought of this possibility. Are you sure that it's really? Chu Luiyue's throat tightened. Taizu nodded. Absolutely. Chu Luiyue closed his eyes. Since the Taizu were so certain, then this matter was most likely true. However, this was simply too inconceivable. To tell you the truth, I accidentally obtained this item in Country Yao Chen's imperial mausoleum. Originally, there was no seal on it, but I met a mysterious person who forcefully sealed it and gave it to me. As Chu Luiyue spoke, he stretched out his right hand. The Black Pyramid appeared in her palm. Its surface was dull and pitch black, and it looked very ordinary. The crack that had appeared earlier had indeed been repaired. Chu Luiyue frowned. If there really was a person's soul inside, then who could it be? The Tianling dynasty had been passed down for thousands of years, and there was no way to find out. What was even stranger was why it would appear in Country Yao Chen's imperial mausoleum. Country Yaochen had existed for much shorter time than the Tianling dynasty, but even so, it was difficult to find the answer. In her impression, none of the ancestors of the Tianling dynasty had been to country Yaochen. However, history books did not represent the real history. Other than the people involved, no one else would know what had happened. If only we could break this seal, Taizu said. Do you know who set up the seal? Chu Liwei shook her head. I've never seen the other party. I only know that it seems to be a man. That's difficult. If we don't break the seal, we won't be able to determine who the soul inside belongs to. Taizu was a little puzzled. I wonder what the person who did this is after? Chu Liwei stared at the black pyramid in her hand and suddenly said, Taizu, I don't think this seal was repaired by itself. It was repaired by the person who set up this seal. Why do you say that? Chu Liwei was silent for a moment and shook her head. This is just my intuition. If that person did it, why did he return this thing to you back then? Couldn't he just keep it for himself? If that person was willing to put in so much effort to set up this barrier, it meant that this thing must be very important to that person. Then why did he spend so much effort to put it in Chu Liue's hands? Chu Liue fell into deep thought. Taizu's words were not without reason. If only she had seen the appearance of the great master back then, after thinking for a long time, she still had no clue. In the end, Chu Liue could only put away the black pyramid and put this matter aside. She had a premonition that the great master would definitely come looking for her again. One day, she would find out the real secret hidden here. After dealing with all these matters, Chu Liue sat cross-legged again. She let out a long breath and prepared to cultivate. This time, Taizu did not say anything. He just stood in front of her and silently protected her. Chu Liue closed her eyes and concentrated. After a period of time, the concentration of heaven and earth energy in the surroundings increased by a lot. It could be seen that in this short period of time, the two Tian baby had swallowed a lot of energy. The water droplet in her dantian began to slowly rotate. The surrounding energy, which was originally flowing towards the two Tian baby, gradually changed direction. Taizu did not notice at first, but when he saw the dark green light around him shake like water waves, he curiously turned around to take a look. He was shocked on the spot by what he saw. Chu Liue's body was already enveloped by a layer of dark green light. The surrounding energy was pouring into her body. She sat there quietly like a statue, as motionless as a mountain, and quickly absorbed the energy. And the speed was getting faster and faster. The great ancestor was horrified. Chu Liue, she was actually snatching the energy from the two Tian baby? He originally thought that she was at most recuperating for a while. He did not expect that she was actually planning to cultivate, and the key point was that she did it. The two Tian baby looked like a small bead, but in fact, it was very domineering. The entire mystic forest was under its control. Everything that had happened before was actually its doing. It could quickly devour all the energy in the surrounding space. In the end, it caused the space to completely collapse. Chu Liue was actually able to snatch energy from it for her own cultivation, even he might not be able to do it. Moreover, Chu Liue was only a stage 5 warrior now. Taizu was dumbfounded. Chu Liue knew nothing about this. In her opinion, she was just absorbing the energy of heaven and earth around her to cultivate. Well, the speed of the water droplet's rotation seemed to be a little faster than before. 5 lines swayed gently on the water droplet. The crystal suddenly swayed and floated towards Chu Liue. Taizu sucked in a breath of cold air. Chu Liue was trying to snatch food from the tiger's mouth. Digression, another mistake after writing, I almost lost the manuscript. After looking for it for a long time, I'm tired, let's go eat. There's nothing to eat today. Dozens of demons have been eaten. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience from love. Chapter 760. Taizu wanted to stop the crystal, but the pressure around him was too heavy. Even he could not bear it. Fortunately, the crystal stopped in midair. It floated quietly in midair. The green light was like water ripples, rippling in all directions. It was dazzling. The surrounding stone walls were illuminated with a faint green color. The heaven-wrecking holy seed inside was clearly visible. Taizu held his breath. This was the closest he had ever been to the two-tian baby. At a glance, it was no different from an ordinary medicinal herb seed. Who would have thought that such a small thing would have the power to destroy the world? Fortunately, with the layer of crystal as a barrier, its aura and pressure were basically blocked. If it really appeared and was completely exposed, who knew what kind of terrifying situation it would be? Taizu turned around and glanced at Chu Luiyue. Her eyes were closed as she cultivated in peace, allowing the surrounding energy of heaven and earth to quickly enter her body. Taizu's expression was solemn. To be able to meet the two-tian baby was undoubtedly a great opportunity. However, this kind of opportunity was not something that everyone could afford to accept. The slightest bit of carelessness could cost one's life. I wonder if the girl can survive this time. While Taizu was filled with worry, Chu Luiyue's aura had already quietly increased. All the energy flowed through her limbs and bones into her dantian, and finally disappeared into the water droplet. After being tempered, the water droplet spat out the pure force and poured it into Chu Luiyue's body. Under the imperceptible influence, the power contained in Chu Luiyue's muscles, bones, blood, and flesh were all improved. Time passed bit by bit. Chu Luiyue was completely immersed in her cultivation, so she did not notice the passage of time. However, for Taizu, this waiting time was especially unbearable. Gradually, he realized that the situation was not what he had expected. This was because Chu Luiyue had already devoured too much energy. According to her current realm, she should have reached her limit long ago. However, Chu Luiyue's expression did not change. His expression was calm, and there was not the slightest difference. Streaks of dark green light, containing abundant power, all entered her body. This isn't right. The Taizu widened his eyes in disbelief. Chu Luiyue's body? Why does it seem like a bottomless pit? He knew that Chu Luiyue had a few trump cards and was much stronger than ordinary cultivators. But wasn't this too exaggerated? For some reason, Taizu suddenly recalled that when Chu Luiyue was polishing the Cloud Sky Copper Sword, he had forced the Tianlei to stay on the sword for a long time. In the end, he had gone up and pulled it down himself. It was a different approach to achieve the same result as the current situation. None of these were things that normal people could do. The Taizu looked at Chu Luiyue with a headache. He was both happy and worried. He was happy that Chu Luiyue's cultivation talent and potential seemed to be better than he had expected. After all, she was a descendant of his bloodline. The Taizu really didn't know how to dote on her now. He was worried that Chu Luiyue had devoured so much energy all of a sudden, and it was even taken from the two-tian baby. Would she really be fine? If that thing exploded, even his old bones wouldn't be able to help much. He turned his gaze slightly and looked at the red-tailed phoenix that was guarding Chu Luiyue. It had been standing there from the beginning. At some point in time, its body was enveloped in a layer of dark green light. It was Chu Luiyue's contracted magical beast. Naturally, it would be affected when Chu Luiyue's strength increased. However, compared to his worries, the red-tailed phoenix retracted its wings and closed its eyes. It seemed to be much more at ease. It was as if it wasn't worried that anything would happen to Chu Luiyue. Buzz. Right at this moment, a loud boom suddenly came from the crystal. The Taizu immediately turned around and was shocked to see that the last seal on it had finally dissipated. The crystal began to vibrate slightly. In an instant, the surrounding light began to surge back towards the crystal. The light that had filled the entire space retreated at a speed visible to the naked eye like a receding tide. Soon, the surroundings dimmed and finally fell into complete darkness. The Taizu's heart tightened as he took a step closer to Chu Luiyue. The aura around his body instantly accumulated. At this moment, the air seemed to have completely frozen. Just as the Taizu was about to think of a way to bring Chu Luiyue away from this place, a speck of starlight suddenly appeared in the darkness. Gradually, the speck of starlight began to expand. The light lit up, and it was indeed the same crystal. However, at this moment, there was only a faint green glow left on the crystal. For some reason, the Taizu felt that this light was different from the one he had seen before. A halo of light spread out from the crystal. Wherever it passed, space collapsed. A large patch of darkness appeared. The halo of light was transparent and revealed an extremely light layer of green. The Taizu knew that something was wrong. Just as he was about to exert his strength, he suddenly realized that his strength was completely suppressed and could not be used at all. Soon, the halo of light spread to this side and gently passed through the translucent soul of the Taizu. Then, it arrived in front of Chu Luiyue and enveloped her. To the Taizu's relief, this did not seem to have any effect on Chu Luiyue. When the halo of light spread to the edge of the surrounding stone walls, it finally stopped. If someone were to look down from above, this place would look like a huge green amber. The Taizu looked up and saw an endless darkness. He frowned slightly. The two Tian baby should have swallowed all the energy from the outside world. Next, he was afraid that, buzz. After a short moment of silence, the crystal trembled even more violently. It seemed that the two Tian baby wanted to completely break free from it. The Taizu stared at it closely, his heart in his throat. This two Tian baby was not as big as the one he had seen before, and its power should not be as terrifying. However, if it really came out, it would be difficult to control it. Within the halo of light, all the energy from the outside world had already been divided up by Chu Luiyue and the two Tian baby. A crazy suction force spread out from the crystal. It seemed that it wanted to take back the energy in Chu Luiyue's body. The black shield in front of Chu Luiyue began to shake because of the cracks in the ground. At this moment, Chu Luiyue suddenly opened her eyes. Two red flames were burning in her eyes. She stared at the two Tian baby and slowly raised her hand. A transparent water droplet suddenly appeared in front of her. She gently moved her hand forward. Bang! The water droplet splashed. In an instant, it condensed into a water curtain in front of her. That terrifying suction force was immediately blocked outside. Chu Luiyue's hand moved slightly and made a grabbing motion in the air. The crystal was actually coming toward her. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 761. However, the crystal seemed to have sensed the danger and released an extremely strong aura. In the end, it stopped 10 steps away from the water curtain. But this time, it didn't try to snatch Chu Luiyue's power. Chu Luiyue tried again and realized that she couldn't make it move forward, so she gave up. She stared at the crystal for a while and chuckled. I hate it when people snatch my things. As if it was afraid, the crystal suddenly took a step back. Taizu? What's going on? It's different from what I expected again. The two Tian baby is hidden in the crystal, but it's actually afraid of Chu Luiyue. Even though Taizu had seen how domineering Chu Luiyue was when she dealt with Tianlei, he still felt that the impact was too great and hard to digest. To be honest, although this thing was the one who pulled Chu Luiyue down, it was actually Chu Luiyue who was snatching its energy now. After all, the energy that Chu Luiyue swallowed was collected by this two Tian baby. However, Chu Luiyue was so self-righteous as if the two Tian baby was really taking advantage of her. Taizu felt a headache coming on again. He had stayed in the Tianling God realm for thousands of years, but he didn't know when the two Tian baby had become so cowardly. Has the world really changed? Taizu looked at the crystal with a complicated expression and found it hard to accept. He could even clearly hear the sound of something collapsing in his heart. Ever since he got together with Chu Luiyue, this kind of thing happened from time to time. Many things in the world have become inconceivable. Most importantly, she herself seems to be used to it and doesn't think she's that cruel. There probably aren't many people in the entire continent who would dare to threaten the two Tian baby with this kind of tone. Taizu looked at the scene in front of him and fell into deep thought. Of course, the two Tian baby wouldn't be afraid of a stage 5 warrior. The key should be that water curtain. This water curtain wasn't big and was only about the height of a person. It just happened to appear in front of Chu Luiyue and separated her from the two Tian baby. The two Tian baby seemed to be very afraid of this water curtain and refused to get close to it. It didn't even hesitate to give up the energy that Chu Luiyue had swallowed. After a short silence, The crystal began to vibrate again. But this time, compared to before, he was much more restrained. The surrounding space gradually became viscous. Chu Liyue's eyes narrowed. However, the great ancestor seemed to have suddenly thought of something and gasped in shock. Taizu, what's wrong? Asked Chu Liyue in confusion. Taizu, to the crystal, to the crystal, to the crystal, to the crystal, 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 the crystal, the crystal, 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 crystal. It controls the space. Have you noticed that this place seems to be different? Chu Liyue nodded. The speed of the energy flow seems to have slowed down. Taizu paused and said with difficulty, "This is because the flow of time here has slowed down." Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. She knew what this meant. Legend had it that those who had broken through to stage 9 could create their own divine territory. And in that divine territory, everything could be controlled at will, including the flow of time. The stronger one was, the more amazing their control in this aspect. There were many benefits to slowing down the flow of time. For example, cultivators could enter it to cultivate, and they could also cultivate some natural treasures. If 1 day in the outside world was equivalent to 10 days in the divine territory, then it was equivalent to increasing one's cultivation speed by 10 times. Medicinal herbs that took 100 years to grow could be harvested in 10 years. In short, the benefits were countless. But wasn't that something that only the legendary top powerhouses could do? Even someone as strong as Taizu only left behind an incomplete Tianling divine territory back then, and he couldn't do this. And this 2 Tian baby. Rumor has it that the 2 Tian baby can do this. Taizu frowned and nodded. Only then did Chu Liyue realize that the 2 Tian baby seemed to be stronger than she had imagined. It probably wants to trap you here. The long time would probably be very difficult to endure. If Chu Liyue couldn't endure it, it would give it a chance. At that time, this is good. Chu Liyue's eyes lit up as she said happily. What? Taizu was confused. You're not worried that it will trap you here forever? It was dark here and she was alone. Even if she wasn't afraid, wouldn't she feel lonely after a long time? One had to know that being in such an environment for a long time could definitely drive people crazy. Even with him around, it wouldn't be easy to endure. Who knew when they would be able to get out? Chu Liyue blinked and smiled. What's there to worry about? I think we can take advantage of this opportunity to cultivate. Can you tell how much slower the flow of time here is compared to the outside world? Taizu hesitated for a moment and said, probably. A day in the outside world is equivalent to a month here. But here, there is no sun or moon, so it should be difficult to know how much time has passed. Chu Liyue smiled and took out an hourglass from her universe ring. That's not a problem. This hourglass counts for an entire day, and it will automatically turn over when it's full. I'm afraid I'll have to trouble you to help me pay more attention in the future. She entered a cultivation state and had no concept of time. With Taizu's help, it would be much more convenient. Taizu clicked his tongue. You have a lot of things with you. You even have this. Chu Liyue coughed. In fact, she didn't prepare this for herself. When Rong Xiu gave her the universe ring, she had a lot of things with her. She had checked it when she was bored. In addition to money and all kinds of treasures, there were many miscellaneous things in it. Among them was this hourglass. She didn't expect it to come in handy at this time. Since you've already made up your mind, I won't say anything more. As you said, this is indeed a rare opportunity. As long as you can get out of here in the end, it won't be a problem. Chu Liyue nodded. Don't worry, I know what to do. Compared to ordinary people and even most cultivation geniuses, her cultivation speed was already extremely fast. But it was far from enough. The opponents she had to face were the most powerful people in the Tianling dynasty, who could almost cover the sky with one hand. Even if she had a lot of trump cards, she was still inferior to them. Now that she could take advantage of this opportunity to improve her cultivation speed, she was naturally very happy. As for Taizu's worry about whether she could get through it, he had experienced so much pain and torment in the past. What did this mean to him now? Chu Liyue closed her eyes and put her hands on her knees, palms facing up. The water curtain swayed gently. Crack! On the crystal, a fragment suddenly fell down. Digression. At 6:00. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 762. The fragment was very thin, only the size of a fingernail. It looked very inconspicuous. However, when Taizu saw this scene, a trace of shock flashed across his face. Without the suppression of the seal, the crystal began to shatter. Just as he was extremely nervous, he saw the fragment flying towards Chu Luiyue. The fragment was pale green, crystal clear, and contained an extremely majestic power. Wherever it passed, the viscous space was almost cut apart. Just like that, it slowly and steadily flew to the front of the water curtain. Then an amazing scene happened. The fragment did not directly pass through the water curtain. Instead, it gradually melted silently. Soon, a faint green color appeared on the transparent water curtain. Then, a faint green water droplet gently condensed and flew towards Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue swallowed the water droplet naturally, and then converted the energy contained in it into her own force. The aura on her body strengthened again. The whole process was smooth and there was no pause at all. Taizu opened his mouth, but suddenly felt that he was at a loss for words. Wasn't Chu Luiyue equivalent to swallowing the power accumulated by the two-Tian baby in a disguised form? Did he just take the energy from the crystal for himself just like that? Looking at Chu Luiyue's calm face, and even her complexion was a little rosy, Taizu suddenly felt that his previous worries were unnecessary. The heaven-wrecking holy seed is formidable, but when it meets Chu Luiyue, who doesn't play by the rules, it was still unknown who would be able to outplay the other. Taizu thought for a moment, and simply retreated a few steps from the position in front of Chu Luiyue to the right front of her, making it easier for her to snatch the power of the two-Tian baby more smoothly. Looking at the red-tailed phoenix, who was very calm from the beginning to the end, Taizu faintly thought that it should have known that Chu Luiyue would do such a thing. As expected, he took after his master. His arrogant and disdainful temperament was exactly the same. After putting down the initial worry in his heart, Taizu calmed down a lot and began to stand by the side. Watch the show. Chu Luiyue was slowly killing time in the god's domain created by the two-Tian baby. She was currently unable to leave, nor was she able to contact anyone from the outside world. She could only focus on her cultivation. On the other hand, Qin Yi and the rest didn't know about her current situation, so they were naturally very worried. Qin Yi felt a little uneasy as he stared at the faint, dark green glow emitting from the broken branches. The inexplicable crack on the tree trunk made him tense up. The seal should have been completely destroyed. He remembered clearly that Chu Luiyue had been swallowed by the same color of light below. From the looks of it, it was very likely that they had already surged up from underground. If it were to erupt, it would be extremely dangerous. This made him even more worried about Chu Luiyue's current condition. Qin Yi held his breath and focused as he walked forward step by step and stood still in front of the tree trunk. This mother tree was very thick and strong. Standing in front of this tree trunk, he seemed very small. The leaves on the tree trunk had all fallen off cleanly. Standing close to the tree trunk, he could see countless tiny cracks on it. Every crack was filled with that strange light. It seemed like it would burst out the next moment. Qin Yi's muscles tensed up as he stretched his hand forward. However, before he could touch the tree trunk, the light suddenly dimmed. In just a split second, all the light in the tiny cracks disappeared. Soundless. This one Yeshan also finally stopped curling up and withered. The surroundings were so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Qin Yi paused for a moment. A silver light flashed in his hand, and a sword appeared. He stared straight ahead as he held the sword with both hands and slowly but firmly slashed it down. Crack! The sword glinted coldly. A layer of bark was sliced off. A deep sword mark was left on the tree trunk. Qin Yi focused his gaze and realized that all the energy in the tree trunk had been swallowed, and it had become much more brittle because of its withered state. However, most of it couldn't be seen. That frightening aura seemed to have dissipated as well. After waiting for a while, There was silence, and nothing happened. A light breeze blew over, and Qin Yi felt a chill on his back. He closed his eyes, kept his sword, and slowly retreated. Mu Hongyu and the rest watched nervously from behind. They didn't even dare to blink, afraid that they would miss something. Everyone was shocked when they saw Qin Yi actually turn around after sending out the sword. Lei Laosi couldn't hold it in and took 2 steps forward first. He hurriedly asked, "Big brother, how is it?" Qin Yi shook his head. Lei Laosi's face turned pale. The other people's expressions also froze. Qin Yi sighed and explained, "I can't be sure. What we can be sure of is that she is currently trapped by a strange force and is unable to come out. Originally, that force should have rushed out, but for some reason, it retreated instead." Lei Laosi was dazed. "Big brother, you mean, you should still remember the scene when we first came here, right?" Qin Yi glanced at him and squinted his eyes slightly. "Back then, the same thing happened to this mother tree. A force wanted to rush out, but that 9-colored heavenly pheasant appeared and repaired the seal, so that incident was left unsettled." Lei Laosi's eyes flickered, and he nodded. In actual fact, the situation back then wasn't completely like that. How could the 9-colored heavenly pheasant do this alone? However, there was no need to tell these children this. So, is it still because of that 9-colored heavenly pheasant this time? No, it's already broken through to become a red-tailed phoenix. Perhaps it became even stronger? Qin Yi nodded. "It's not impossible." When Mu Hongyu and the rest heard this, they heaved a sigh of relief. This means that Lu Yu still has a high chance of coming out? The red-tailed phoenix is a legendary fiend. It should be able to help her, right? Mu Hongyu and Yi Ranran were both optimistic. Only Chang Wanzhou looked deeply at Qin Yi, pressed his lips tightly together, and didn't say anything. "I've seen that scene before. The red-tailed phoenix definitely isn't a match for that force." However, Qin Yi clearly didn't want Mu Hongyu and Yi Ranran to know about this. "Then what should we do now? Can we only wait here for Lu Yu?" asked Yi Ranran with a frown. Qin Yi turned around and looked at that mother tree. "Let's hope so." At the border where the mystic forest and mirror lake connected, the appearance of the dancing lotus made Shangguan and the rest very excited. She immediately suggested for Mu Qinghe to retrieve the dancing lotus. Once she said that, the originally noisy surroundings instantly quietened down. Everyone looked at Mu Qinghe with different expressions. Curious, envious, worried. Everyone knew that Mirror Lake was dangerous. The first to go would definitely be the first to bear the brunt. Mu Qinghe kept quiet for a while and nodded. "Yes. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network." Chapter 763. Then, Mu Qinghe turned around and walked in the direction of the dancing lotus. The boundary between the mystic forest and the mirror lake was very clear. In the middle was something like a dam. On one side was the thick ground of the mystic forest that was filled with fallen leaves, and on the other side was the mirror lake that was glistening with water. Surprisingly, the isolated dam was only an inch wide, but none of the leaves from the mystic forest flew to the lake on the other side. The waves on the lake also did not cross the dam and flow to the other side. There seemed to be an invisible barrier in the middle that separated the two sides clearly. Mu Qinghe soon arrived at the narrow dam. He took a deep breath, circulated the force in his body, and swung his right hand. A long sword flew out. It floated in front of him. Mu Qinghe jumped and stood on the flying sword. Just as he was about to ride the sword forward, he inadvertently glanced at the lake and found that there seemed to be something sparkling on the surface of the lake. He squinted his eyes and looked over. Then he was stunned on the spot, because the sparkling thing was actually a piece of floating ice. The afterglow of the setting sun shone on it, and the clear, glass-like floating ice reflected the bright and dazzling light. The mirror lake was vast and boundless. Its borders were close to the mystic forest and the Red Moon Desert. It was like spring and summer all year round, and the water rippled. Why would such a piece of floating ice suddenly appear? "Vice Admiral Mu, is there a problem?" Sheng Guanwan saw that Mu Qinghe was not moving and could not help but urge him. Mu Qinghe did not respond immediately. Instead, he looked around. Sure enough, he saw another piece of floating ice not far away. This piece of floating ice was quietly floating on the surface of the lake. It was inconspicuous. If not for the fact that Mu Qinghe happened to be standing in the sky in the afterglow of the setting sun, he would definitely not have noticed it. For example, Sheng Guanwan and the others did not see this strange situation. Mu Qinghe felt a little uneasy. This mirror lake is strange. Sheng Guanwan frowned. What's strange? Mu Qinghe raised her hand and pointed. Floating ice has never appeared in Mirror Lake before. Sheng Guanwan looked at Mu Qinghe's serious expression and thought that something big had happened. Who would have thought that it was only because of 1 or 2 pieces of floating ice? She chuckled and said calmly, "That's right. It's just 2 pieces of floating ice. It shouldn't be a big deal, right? If Vice Admiral Mu is really worried, why don't we get the dancing lotus back as soon as possible and leave immediately?" Mu Qinghe's frown deepened. Third Princess, you may not know this, but this mirror lake has always been like this for a long time. There has never been such a situation before. I'm afraid that something strange has happened. Elder Qiushi, since you want the dancing lotus so much, why don't you go first? Elder Qiushi was a little scared. His gaze wandered back and forth between Mu Qinghe and the dancing lotus. He was in a dilemma. He really wanted to retrieve the dancing lotus, but he was also afraid that something would happen. Mu Qinghe's reaction really didn't make one feel at ease. Seeing that the two of them had stopped, Sheng Guanwan couldn't help but urge them. Elder Qiushi made up his mind. There were so many people here anyway. What was there to worry about? If he was the one who retrieved the dancing lotus, his status would definitely rise when he returned to West Hill. At the thought of this, the balance in his heart finally leaned towards the side of greed. He walked past Mu Qinghe and approached. However, he wasn't stupid. He didn't use his hands to retrieve it. Such a treasure was definitely not that easy to obtain. He waved his sleeve and threw out a rope as thick as a thumb, wrapping it around the branch of the dancing lotus. After waiting for a moment, there was nothing unusual. Elder Qiushi felt a little more confident. He pulled his wrist back, trying to pull the dancing lotus out. However, just as he moved, the rope slid down the branch. Elder Qiushi missed his target. He looked up in shock and realized that the branch was extremely smooth. There was a faint luster on it, and it was indeed very difficult to bind it with a rope. He thought for a moment and set up a barrier around himself. At the same time, he put away the rope and used his sword. He approached step by step and finally raised his sword to slash. However, just as the sword came into contact with the branch, it actually slipped. Before Elder Qiushi could react, his body was pulled down by an invisible force. Plop! It penetrated the ice layer and fell into the lake. Digression, 6:30 p.m. February has been abolished. Sob 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 sob. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 764. A hole instantly appeared on the smooth and flat ice surface. A few drops of lake water splashed out, but Elder Qiushi's figure had already completely sunk into the lake and disappeared. In fact, he didn't even have the time to cry out in alarm. Mu Qinghe, who was standing closest to him, had a change in expression, and his pupils constricted. The entire thing happened too suddenly. Before he could react, everything had already ended. He didn't even have the chance to take action. When Sheng Guanwan and the rest, who were standing far away, saw this scene, they were all stunned on the spot. Especially Sheng Guanwan. She was originally waiting happily and expectantly for Elder Qiushi to retrieve the dancing lotus. She was about to succeed, but she didn't even see what exactly happened. Just now, wasn't everything fine? In just the blink of an eye, Elder Qiushi suddenly fell into the water. Sheng Guanwan widened her eyes in shock. After Elder Qiushi fell into the water, he didn't make a single sound. Especially now, when the water surface seemed to have regained its calmness. Under normal circumstances, anyone who fell into the water would struggle and ask for help. Elder Qiushi didn't. There's only one possibility, he's already dead. In that short moment, Shangguan clutched her chest, and her footsteps faltered as she instinctively grabbed Jiang Yuqing's arm. Yuqing, what happened just now? Jiang Yuqing knitted his brows tightly and spoke in a low voice. He seemed to have been dragged down by something, but I didn't see it clearly either. Shangguan's throat was dry, and she felt both fearful and relieved. Luckily, I didn't go over personally just now. If not, I would be the one dead. But Elder Qiushi is a stage 7 warrior. How can it be? To be able to take his life in such a short period of time, it's enough to show how scary it is. If it were someone else, they might die even faster than me. Jiang Yuqing's face was also very dark. Elder Duanmu Chun is already gone. Now, even Elder Qiushi is. This trip was much more dangerous than he had expected. Shangguan lowered her eyes and her eyes flashed. She was the one who killed Elder Duanmu Chun, but Jiang Yuqing didn't seem to know. He probably thought that she would only attack these young geniuses, right? Little did they know that she had long found Elder Duanmu Chun an eyesore. This was because Duanmu Chun was not her confidant, and he had always been on good terms with Shangguan. Elder Duanmu Chun had an amiable temperament. Although he was an elder of the royal family, he had never participated in the affairs of the royal family. Even though Shangguan admired him back then, he did not become her man. He had always kept to himself. He was still the same when he came to Shangguan. Most people wouldn't care, but Shangguan couldn't stand it. Moreover, he always used Shangguan's standards when she was in power to measure everything she did. This violated Shangguan's taboo. Therefore, she might as well take this opportunity to get rid of Elder Duanmu Chun. However, this was not important. Anyway, many people had died in her hands. One more didn't make a difference. Those who couldn't be used by her were dead. It was a pity that Elder Qiushi died. After the initial shock, she finally regained her senses. She looked at Mu Qinghe with suppressed anger. Vice Admiral Mu, what's going on? You were close to Elder Qiushi. Why didn't you help? She even suspected that Mu Qinghe did it on purpose. He had always disliked Elder Qiushi. Mu Qinghe said coldly. The last general also wanted to help, but he didn't have the strength. Even Elder Qiushi didn't have the strength to retaliate. Could it be that Your Highness, the third princess, thought that this general was still some distance away from Elder Qiushi just now? Could it be that this general could reach him first if he made a move later? Shangguan choked. Mu Qinghe's words made sense. Everyone clearly saw the situation just now. Mu Qinghe probably didn't have time to help. The last general already said that there's something wrong with Mirror Lake. Now you finally believe it, right? Mu Qinghe's words made Shangguan's face turn red and white. Wasn't saying this in front of so many people the same as publicly criticizing her? Mu Qinghe took one last look at the spot where Elder Qiushi disappeared. There seemed to be a faint green light flashing by. He narrowed his eyes and was about to take a closer look when a layer of ice formed on the surface again. That ice hole was quickly repaired and looked exactly the same as before. It was impossible to tell that it had once shattered and that a person had fallen in. More and more layers of ice began to form on the surface of the lake in the distance. Mu Qinghe said in a low voice. Third princess, eldest young master, it's better for us to leave Mirror Lake as soon as possible. In the quiet and sticky space, Chu Luiyue sat cross-legged and was cultivating peacefully. Not far away on the opposite side, the crystal quietly floated. Suddenly, the layer of faint green light on the outside fluctuated. Then, a faint green light passed through the light and headed toward the crystal. Chu Luiyue seemed to have sensed something and opened her eyes. Seeing the light, she raised her eyebrows slightly and muttered softly. It has a lot of tricks up its sleeve. The energy in the mystic forest should have been completely devoured by it. She didn't expect it to be able to get such an abundant energy. Chu Luiyue's red lips curved. With a slight thought, the water curtain shook gently. The ball of light was about to fly to the crystal and was about to merge with it. However, when the water curtain moved, the ball of light also seemed to be pulled by something and flew over in a wobbly manner. Like the previous fragment, the light silently merged with the water curtain and finally turned into a water droplet and arrived in front of Chu Liyue. Chu Liyue's eyes curved. "Since you're so polite, I'll kindly accept it." After saying that, she swallowed the energy of the water droplet. Taizu, who was standing at the side, raised his eyebrows fiercely and glanced at the crystal. It was trembling slightly. It wasn't the kind that wanted to break out forcefully. It was because of anger. Digression: I didn't add any new chapters today, because I ate the updated chapters. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 765. For the first time, Taizu felt that the two-Tian baby was a little pitiful. It had finally broken the seal, and just as it was about to break out, Chu Liyue appeared out of nowhere. Not only did she snatch the energy it had gathered, she even snatched it several times. It didn't know how she had gotten this energy, or if Chu Liyue had forcibly snatched it away. Who wouldn't be angry when the duck in their mouth flew away? The key point was that Taizu was still afraid of Chu Liyue. If it wasn't for the water curtain, Taizu believed that Chu Liyue would definitely not be a match for the two-Tian baby. But how could there be so many ifs in the world? Speaking of which, it was Taizu who had forcibly pulled Chu Liyue down. It was just asking for trouble. Taizu put his hands in his sleeves and laughed. According to the current development of the situation, the chances of the two-Tian baby coming out were even slimmer. It was hard to say who would be able to endure who. Chu Liyue's aura was still increasing. She carefully and patiently refined all of this energy, transforming it into her own force. Her flesh, blood, tendons, and bones became more and more resilient under the cleansing of this pure energy. Time slowly passed. At a certain moment, Chu Liyue's aura skyrocketed. A slight sound came from within her body. Chu Liyue's strength had finally advanced to the middle stage of stage 5. Taizu noticed this movement and subconsciously glanced at the hourglass next to him, a trace of shock flashing through his eyes. Chu Liyue's breakthrough speed was too fast. Although he had already mentally prepared himself, it was still hard to believe that Chu Liyue had smoothly and quickly crossed the threshold of the middle stage. She had the Daijing Yuan Meridian. Although it couldn't be compared to the Tianjing Yuan Meridian, her cultivation speed was obviously faster than the average Daijing Yuan Meridian cultivator. Taizu put his hands behind his back and looked at Chu Liyue with a solemn gaze. When she was Shangguanyu, her cultivation had reached the peak of a rank 8 warrior and she was only one step away from becoming a rank 9 warrior. With such an experience, Chu Liyue would undoubtedly take fewer detours when she cultivated in this life. Plus, she had many heaven-defying opportunities. Taizu sighed softly, his eyes flashing with admiration. Although it was a pity that Chu Liyue didn't have the Tianjing Yuan Meridian, she had been able to come so far. He wondered what realm she would be able to reach by the time she got out of here. The outside world had no way of knowing what was happening underground. At this moment, Shangguanyu Yang faced a dilemma. On one hand, Yu of the lotus flower. On the other hand, he hadn't obtained the dancing lotus yet. It would be a pity to leave just like that. After Mu Qing has said that, everyone fell silent and looked at Shangguanyu. Even the sect disciples who had been admiring the beautiful scenery of Mirror Lake and were full of yearning were now nervous. In the beginning, no one took Mu Qing's warning to heart. But when something happened to Elder Qiushi, they immediately understood that this place was completely different from what they had expected. Mu Qing's words weren't alarmist words. She might even have been tactful. They came to the great desolate swamp mostly for the treasures here. But the premise was that they had to be alive. The dancing lotus was indeed a rare treasure, but if they had to pay with their lives for it, no one would continue to do it. Shangguanyu also knew this. At this time, it wasn't appropriate for her to send anyone. That would be sending them to their deaths. But she really wanted to get the dancing lotus. Jiang Yuqing saw that she seemed to be very conflicted and could roughly guess her thoughts. Everyone saw the scene just now. This Mirror Lake is indeed strange. If we stay any longer, I'm afraid the casualties will be even more serious. It's better to evacuate first. Anyway, the dancing lotus is here, and it will bloom for a few years. Let's go back to Xiling first and think of a way to get it later. Sheng Guanyu was still a little hesitant. But what if something happens during this time? You've seen how difficult it is to deal with the dancing lotus. Even Elder Qiushi couldn't escape. Who can easily take it away? Sheng Guanyu thought about it and felt that his words made sense. In the entire Tianling dynasty, there weren't many people who were stronger than Elder Qiushi. As long as the news of the dancing lotus's appearance wasn't leaked, there shouldn't be too much of a problem. Jiang Yuqing looked at her, and his voice became gentler. Also, you need to go back and recuperate as soon as possible. It won't delay anything if you come back after you've recovered. These words finally convinced Sheng Guanyu. Her body and face both needed to be recuperated. With the mirror lake in this state, she definitely wouldn't have the chance to make a move on anyone. It was better to go back to Xiling first. Perhaps she could find a suitable person and opportunity. She thought for a moment and finally nodded. But after Sheng Guanyu agreed, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. The two royal elders who came with them had both died. The danger of the Dahuang swamp was obvious. If they were a little unlucky, they might be the ones who died. Under Mu Qinghe's command, everyone began to evacuate. However, compared to the excitement they had when they came, everyone now looked dejected and disappointed. They had all come with all kinds of expectations, but who knew that they would end up with nothing and almost lose their lives? Because there were more injured people, Zhu Hong and the others from Dragon Teeth Mountain walked at the back. However, compared to the other sects, they were luckier. Although they had many injured people, their survival rate was extremely high. No one died. Just this point alone was enough to make people envious. After all, the disciples who came here were all famous geniuses from various sections. The death of any one of them was a great loss to them. However, the most miserable was not the few weaker sects in Tianji Manor, but the Purple Shao Sword sect. They came with 10 people. When they returned, only 3 people were left. One of them was even the Purple Shao Sword sect's young master, Song Qingyan. Although the remaining 2 saved their lives, they were seriously injured. Their future cultivation might be affected. Who would have thought that the high-spirited Purple Shao Sword sect would end up like this in the end? The sky had already completely darkened. A bright moon rose into the sky, scattering its light. Everyone traveled for a long time and finally returned to the border area of the 3 places. Standing here again, everyone's mood was already completely different from before. On the left, the once lush mystic forest had already become a wilderness. The ground was rugged and uneven. Withered branches and withered leaves covered it, mixed with withered tree trunks and festering tree roots. At a glance, it was like a ghost domain. A sinister aura enveloped the area. Just looking at it from afar made one shudder. Zhu Hong could not help but look at Mu Qinghe and ask softly, "Vice Admiral Mu Hongyu and the rest are still inside. Shall we wait for them?" Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 766. As soon as he said that, the people nearby fell silent for a moment. They all looked over with different expressions. Mu Qinghe looked serious and did not answer immediately. Instead, it was Sheng Guanyu who heard the commotion and narrowed her eyes dangerously, asking deliberately, "Vice Admiral Mu, what are you talking about?" Mu Qinghe knew that she could actually hear them, but she asked deliberately. However, he still lowered his head slightly and said word by word, "Mu Hongyu and the others have not returned yet. Your Highness, should we wait here for a while and bring them back to West Hill?" Sheng Guanyu widened her eyes slightly, as if she was very surprised. "They're not here yet? It's been a long time. Haven't they given up?" She did not need to say the rest of the sentence. Everyone knew what she meant. The surroundings were silent. Zhu Hong could not help but argue. "Your Highness, they're in the mystic forest. They probably don't know that we're planning to go back. They didn't even hear the news. How could they rush here?" Sheng Guanyu was deliberately making things difficult for them. "Oh, is it? I was only thinking about retrieving the dancing lotus to treat my father's illness. I forgot about these things. Shangguan reacted quickly and immediately defended herself. She glanced at Zhu Hong with gloomy eyes and said meaningfully, "It seems that Dragon Teeth Mountain and Chongshu Pavilion are really close. You're still thinking about them at this time." Zhu Hong straightened his back and said frankly, "Lu Yu saved the people of Dragon Teeth Mountain. We all owe her a favor. Moreover, Hong Yu is also there. Naturally, we are worried." Shangguan choked. Before she could speak, Zhu Hong continued, "Your Highness, we beg you to release the signal immediately and summon them back. We'll leave together when they return. The Dahuang swamp is full of danger. If they stay here alone, I'm afraid." Shangguan was impatient and interrupted him. "If they don't come back, are we going to let so many people wait here forever?" "Zhu Hong, I know what you're thinking, but you have to know that the big picture is more important." Zhu Hong choked. Seeing that he had nothing to say, Shangguan brushed her hair behind her ear with satisfaction. Anyway, with Qin Yi and Lei Laosi around, nothing should happen to them. Right now, everyone is gravely injured. Many people's injuries cannot be delayed. With that, she turned around to leave. Whoosh! The sharp sound of something breaking through the air suddenly rang in his ears. Shangguan turned her head in astonishment, only to see Jiang Yuqing holding a jade tube in his hand. Bang! Above the sky, a loud bang suddenly exploded. She looked up and saw a brilliant firework blooming in the night sky. Because it was nighttime, it was even more conspicuous. Even if Mu Hongyu and the others were in the mystic forest, they should be able to see it. Rest here for 2 hours. If they don't show up in 2 hours, we'll leave immediately. Jiang Yuqing's tone was very calm, but there was no room for disobedience. Obviously, he was not discussing it with Shangguan, but directly making this decision. Mu Qinghe responded and ordered everyone to rest on the spot before setting off in 2 hours. Zhu Hong and the rest heaved a sigh of relief and started anxiously waiting for Mu Hongyu and the others to return. Other than them, there were many others who also looked in the direction of the mystic forest and waited silently. Whispers could be heard. "I wonder if they can come back in time. Compared to this, I'm more curious about Ms. Chu's situation. Do you think she's really still alive?" "This is hard to say. Anyway, I owe Ms. Chu my life. If it weren't for her, I would have died in the swamp of the mystic forest. It'd be best if she could come back. If not, then we have to be more polite when we see the people from Chongshu Pavilion. Actually, I think that there's a possibility. Have you forgotten that she won first place in the Wanzheng competition back then? Back then, she was already able to defeat so many people in the Tianling God realm. She might be able to turn danger into safety this time. I hope so." There were many people who were saved by Chu Luiyue, and most of them were the iron-blooded Black Cavalry. They naturally valued this kindness even more. They also sincerely hoped that Chu Luiyue would return safely like the others. Shangguan heard these words clearly. She clenched her fists and looked at Jiang Yuqing angrily. What does he mean by this? It's only 2 hours. It'll be over soon. Jiang Yuqing didn't seem to mind her emotions and only spoke indifferently. Many people are indebted to Chu Luiyue for saving their lives. If you leave just like this, have you thought about what they will say in private? Shangguan bit her lip and swallowed the words in her throat. She turned around and didn't look at Jiang Yuqing anymore. Jiang Yuqing frowned. Shangguan was scheming, but she was narrow-minded and short-sighted. She didn't look at the big picture. Didn't she know how important the Black Cavalry was to maintaining the imperial power? The Black Cavalry was like an iron plate. Anyone who kicked it forcefully would only suffer. Mu Qinghe was the deputy general of the Black Cavalry and held military power. His words were more dignified than Shangguan's, the third princess. This was also one of the reasons why Jiang Yuqing didn't choose to kill Mu Qinghe back then. One move could affect the whole body. Even if Mu Qinghe listened to him now, he didn't dare to underestimate Mu Qinghe and the Black Cavalry behind him. Looking at Shangguan's angry back, Jiang Yuqing rubbed his temples in annoyance. Back then, Shangguan was the princess. Her position was stable, and it could be said that no one could shake it. She could have been high and mighty in the imperial court and enjoyed everything. But she didn't. Jiang Yuqing had done a special investigation. Sheng Guanyu had put in a lot of effort for the Black Guards, both in the open and in the dark. She also took a lot of credit for taking down Da Huang Swamp. This was also why the Black Cavalry had always respected and admired her. However, she didn't deliberately publicize this. Instead, she kept a very low profile. As a result, the world only knew that it was Mu Qinghe who volunteered to be her right-hand man after achieving outstanding military achievements. But they didn't know that there was such an inside story. Shengguan Wan was promoted halfway and didn't have the upper hand. If she completely offended the Black Cavalry, she might fail at the last step. If it was Shengguan Yu, how could she make such a low-level mistake? Jiang Yuqing closed his eyes. That face that was as bright as the moon appeared in his mind again. Her smile was bright, gentle, and elegant. There was a trace of nobility between her eyebrows. It was as if she was high and mighty and unapproachable. Jiang Yuqing's lips curled into a faint smile, but it quickly dissipated and was gradually replaced by hatred. He didn't mind that she didn't like him, as long as she didn't like others. But she didn't do it. That face gradually disappeared. It was replaced by another face. Jiang Yuqing looked at the mystic forest. If she could come out alive this time, mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from love. Chapter 767. Bang. Hearing this loud sound, Mu Hongyu and the rest, who were still waiting in the mystic forest, all looked up. Yi Ranran widened his eyes slightly. That seems to be eldest young Master Zhang's signal. Mu Hongyu didn't have a good impression of Jiang Yuqing and the rest, so she frowned. It's already so late. Shouldn't they have left long ago? Yi Ranran explained. They seem to be gathering people. Maybe they're asking us to go back? Then, the two of them looked at each other. That bunch of people clearly left long ago. Why are they still gathering us now? That's where the three realms intersect. Qi Ni glanced at it and said lightly. They're probably planning to wait for you guys before leaving. However, they probably won't wait for too long. If they really wanted Mu Hongyu and the rest to leave with them from the start, they would have sent the signal long ago. Why wait until now? We're already standing on the transportation formation. It doesn't matter if it's earlier or later. They're just calling people along the way. Mu Hongyu shook her head and was unmoved. I want to wait here for Lu Yu to come out. Me too. Yi Ranran nodded firmly. Chang Wanzhou stood at the side and didn't say much. In actual fact, he didn't even look at the signal flare. From beginning to end, his attention was focused on the mother tree. Lei Laosi glanced at the gradually dissipating fireworks and chuckled. Hypocrite. They were already very clear about what kind of person Jiang Yuqing was. The remaining few people shouldn't have been able to enter his eyes. For some reason, he actually did this time. However, to Lei Laosi, he didn't have good intentions no matter what. If it weren't because Her Highness wanted to form a contract with the red-tailed phoenix, they definitely wouldn't have let Jiang Yuqing off so easily. And that Shengguan Wan, anyway, the nine-colored heavenly pheasant had already successfully broken through to become a red-tailed phoenix, so they didn't have to wait here anymore. When Her Highness comes out, they can also leave this place together. When that time comes, they'll suffer. This summoning signal did not attract their attention. After a brief chat, they put the matter to the back of their minds and concentrated on waiting for Chu Luiyue to come out. Under Qin Yi's request, Mu Hongyu and Yi Ranran started cultivating while waiting. No one knew when Chu Luiyue would come out. It was always good to increase one's strength. As for Chang Wanzhou, after swallowing a pill, he continued to stand guard. At first, Qin Yi didn't pay much attention to it and thought that the pill was for him to treat his injuries. However, he soon discovered that Chang Wanzhou's aura was growing stronger. The key was that he did not absorb the energy of heaven and earth around him to increase his strength. Instead, the energy was emitted from his body. Therefore, even if he wasn't as focused on cultivation as Mu Hongyu and Yi Ranran, his cultivation was still slowly improving. Gradually, a thin layer of frost covered Chang Wanzhou's body. Even the ground beneath his feet was covered in a layer of ice. A chilly aura was emitted from his body, but the Cloud Sky Copper Sword kept burning with a sparrow blue flame. The Cloud Sky Copper Sword contained Chu Liyue's strength, so he could use this method to sense her aura more clearly. Just like that, Chang Wanzhou waited for Chu Liyue under the two extreme forces, one cold and one hot, while increasing his strength. What's wrong with this fellow? Lei Laosi finally noticed that something was amiss and couldn't help but mumble. I've never seen someone cultivate like this. Qin Yi narrowed his eyes. There should be a cold aura in his body, and this cold aura contains a large amount of strength. As long as he dispels this cold aura, his strength will naturally increase. Lei Laosi secretly thought that his big brother's eyes were sharp and couldn't help but give him a thumbs up. Big brother, you're not a celestial physician, so how do you know this? Qin Yi smiled lightly. It's just a guess. When Chang Wanzhou heard this voice, he finally turned to look at the two of them. His gaze stopped on Qin Yi's face for a moment, and his brows, which were covered by his short blonde hair, knitted slightly as he subconsciously became alert. Other than myself, only Chu Liyue knows about my body's condition. How did he know? He said that it was a guess, but Chang Wanzhou didn't quite believe it. This guess was way too accurate. As though he saw through Chang Wanzhou's suspicion, Qin Yi raised his brows. You don't have to look at me like that. I've seen a similar example in a book before. When I saw your situation, I naturally thought of it. A shocked expression flashed across Chang Wanzhou's face. After hesitating for a moment, he finally spoke and asked hesitantly, You said you saw a similar situation like mine in a book before? Qin Yi nodded. According to the records, that person successfully dispelled the cold aura in his body and broke through to become a top warrior. However, the process was very difficult, and normal people wouldn't be able to persevere. Actually, what he didn't say was that there wasn't only one example in that book. In actual fact, there were hundreds and thousands of people who encountered such a situation. Out of so many people, only one succeeded in the end. Those who didn't all died. This meant that there should be many people like that other than Chang Wanzhou. However, Chang Wanzhou should be the only one who managed to survive. However, he clearly didn't know anything about this. Chang Wanzhou pressed his lips together. What book is that? Can I take a look? Ever since he could remember, his body had been like this. He had no parents, no relatives, and no friends. Growing up in the barren and barbaric Nanjiang, he suffered a lot. If I didn't meet that person later on, I would have died in Thousand Reed Lake. That book isn't mine, and I think it can't be found anymore. At this point, a hint of desolation flashed across Qin Yi's eyes. When Chang Wanzhou saw this, he didn't ask any more. Instead, it was Qin Yi who suddenly asked after a moment of silence. The pill you swallowed just now should have helped you dispel this cold air, right? Chang Wanzhou nodded. Where did this pill come from? Chang Wanzhou didn't hide it. Lu, you made it. This was within his expectations. Her Highness has also read that book, so it's normal for her to know how to make it. Qin Yi smiled faintly. You're really lucky. He actually survived it alone. Chang Wanzhou nodded seriously. My luck is really good. Everyone I met treated me well. Suddenly, an extremely faint pattern flashed across his glabella. Qin Yi was suddenly stunned. There's a seal in your body? Chang Wanzhou looked at him in shock and nodded hesitantly. Even Chu Liyue didn't know about this. That was because that seal was also covered by the cold air. Now that the cold air in his body gradually melted and dissipated, that seal gradually revealed itself. However, since that seal didn't do anything, he didn't pay much attention to it. Qin Yi was shocked as he hurriedly asked, Who left that seal for you? That seems to be digression. 6 p.m. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from LoveWeb. Chapter 768. Chang Wanzhou shook his head. I don't know either. He only knew that there was a seal in his body, but he didn't know when it appeared or who set it up. Also, this seal itself was very strange. If other people had a seal in their body, it would usually be used to suppress their force. However, This wasn't the case for his seal. It even froze because of the strong yin aura. Until now, Chang Wanzhou still didn't know what the seal was used for. He had once thought of removing it, but he had tried many methods, but the seal remained unaffected. In the end, when he saw that the seal didn't move, he decided to just put this matter aside. He didn't expect Qin Yi to actually see through it. Also, he seemed to be very anxious. Disappointment flashed across Qin Yi's eyes when he heard Chang Wanzhou's reply. He walked to Chang Wanzhou and wanted to take a closer look to confirm if it was what he had guessed. However, the seal pattern had already disappeared. Seeing Qin Yi staring at his glabella, Chang Wanzhou instantly understood something. "There's something on my head?" After confirming that the seal wouldn't appear again, he sighed in his heart and nodded. "It just flashed, so I didn't see it clearly." Chang Wanzhou scrutinized his expression and asked tentatively, "What's the matter? You've seen this seal before?" Qin Yi kept quiet for a while before replying softly. "I think so, but the impression is a little blurry. Plus, I didn't see it clearly. I can't quite recall it." Chang Wanzhou was skeptical. If that seal really appeared on my glabella, Qin Yi's eyes would have been filled with shock the moment he saw it. That kind of expression definitely wasn't something that someone who couldn't recall would have. "I don't want to talk about it? Why is that?" However, Chang Wanzhou didn't continue asking. Qin Yi looked at him with a complicated gaze before retracting his gaze. After a while, he said, "As your abilities increase, that seal will definitely appear again. Just be more careful. If there are any abnormalities, inform me as soon as possible." His tone was a little solemn. Chang Wanzhou thought for a moment and gently nodded. The few people around him were a little confused by this scene and looked over one after another. Lei Laosi couldn't help but ask, "Big brother, what's wrong?" Qin Yi shook his head. "Nothing." Since he denied it like this, the others naturally couldn't continue to say anything. Lei Laosi was a little perturbed. His elder brother had always been calm and composed. Except for the time when he heard that something had happened to His Highness, he had almost never seen him so emotional. He didn't see the seal that flashed across Chang Wanzhou's head. He didn't know what it was that made his big brother lose his composure like this. After this small commotion, the group quieted down again. Only Qin Yi remained calm on the surface, but his heart was in turmoil. If he was not mistaken, His Highness shouldn't know about this yet. When he had the chance, he had to inform her as soon as possible. An hour was gone in a flash. The direction of the mystic forest was silent. Mu Hongyu and the others were still nowhere to be seen. The hope in Zhu Hong and the others' eyes gradually dimmed. It's already so late, yet they still aren't here. They definitely don't intend to leave with us. Many people at the side also revealed regretful and disappointed expressions. They originally hoped that Chu Luiwei and the others could appear together. "It's time, right?" asked Shengguan Wan. At this point, she had already calmed down. As Chu Luiwei and the others didn't come back on time, her mood was much better. This can only prove that Mu Hongyu and the others still haven't found Chu Luiwei. How can they find him? What a joke. Unless they flip the entire mystic forest upside down, there's still a slight possibility. However, by then Chu Luiwei would probably have rotted into a pile of bones. Jiang Yuqing looked down and hid the emotions in his eyes. "Let's go." Mu Qinghe went forward and activated the transportation array. The group of people quickly disappeared. The cold moonlight sprinkled on the vast and boundless Dehuang swamp, bringing with it a bit of desolation and loneliness. Unknowingly, a red spot appeared on the moon. The red dot gradually expanded, and soon, it covered the entire area without a sound. The originally bright and unparalleled moon completely turned blood red. It looked strange. The hot and dry desert during the day became incomparably cold at night. The night wind blew, and it was bone-chilling. Under the undulating sand dunes, something seemed to be agitating. Suddenly, an ethereal voice was heard. "She's back?" It was impossible to tell whether this voice was male or female. It was as pleasant as music and intoxicating. A moment later, sand rolled down from the sand dunes not far away, forming a quicksand and making rustling sounds. How is this possible? This seemed to be the voice of a baby. It sounded very young, but the tone was very mature with a trace of resentment. Back then, she said that she would be back in a few days. In the end, a few years have passed and there's still no trace of her. How can a person who goes back on her words be trusted? I don't want to see her again in this life. If you don't want to see her, then why do you look outside every night of the red moon? Do you think we don't know what you've been doing all day? This time, the one who spoke seemed to be an old man. His voice was old and had a bit of laziness. This desert has been stirred up by you. There's no peace in this place. The baby-like voice was silent for a long time before it said fiercely, "So what if I'm looking? I just want to see how long she can drag it out. In this world, only she dares to lie to me like this." Chapter 769. On the other side of the mystic forest, a few people had sneaked into it. How long has it been? How did the mystic forest become like this? Someone came. I think it's Mu Qinghe and a bunch of black cavalry. Also, there are a few more that we haven't seen before. These people are really unlucky to come here and encounter such a situation. Wait, why is that sparrow gone? I think I smell the red-tailed phoenix. Did that sparrow successfully break through? How is that possible? That fellow is missing half of her soul. Wait, there seem to be a few more people in front? Those two silly fellows are still here? Why are there a few more little ones? That sparrow really seems to have broken through. But why do I feel like she's underground? Could it be that she's old, so her ears and eyes aren't working well? You're right. She's underground. I think she's with that thing, the one who said this was the elder. Once he said this, the other two instantly quietened down. After a moment, that baby-like voice sounded angrily. I told you to dig that thing out and give it to her. Give it to her. You just had to say that the timing wasn't right. Great, she really went down by herself now. If that girl bumps into it, I'll beat you up. There's nothing wrong with a child wanting something, but that thing isn't normal. If we really gave it to her directly, who knows what kind of trouble might have arisen. The pleasant voice didn't sound that anxious as it spoke slowly. I wonder who said that he wanted to teach that girl a lesson just now, but in the blink of an eye, he became angry with us because of her. Big Bao, you're really impressive. Try calling me Big Bao again. Little Bao? Damn pervert, you're courting death. Can the two of you fight further away? Don't disturb me from looking at the girl. Scram. Scram. This commotion didn't attract the attention of Qin Yi and the rest. The night was as cold as water. Everything here was no different from during the day. Yi Ranran and Mu Hongyu were already asleep. Chang Wanzhou was sitting cross-legged beside the two of them, the cloud sky copper sword lying across his knees. As Lei Laosi and Qin Yi had powerful cultivations, they didn't need to sleep. As long as they regulated their breathing, they could recover their energy. The two of them watched over Mu Hongyu and the others while looking at the completely withered Wan Yeshan. Suddenly, the wind in the forest became louder. On the mother tree, a branch broke and fell to the ground, making a sound. Lei Laosi suddenly jumped up. Who? He glanced around nervously, but he didn't find anyone. Qin Yi rubbed his glabella helplessly. It's just a broken branch. It's not a big deal. Fourth brother, you're too tense. Lei Laosi looked over and scratched his head awkwardly. I thought, he sighed, unable to hide his disappointment. Just now, he thought that His Highness had come out. Qin Yi also knew that Lei Laosi was too worried about Chu Luiyue, so he said gently, rest for a while first. However, Lei Laosi shook his head and refused. Seeing his determined expression, Qin Yi didn't persuade him anymore. The forest quietened down again. Old thing, have you not moved for too long that your limbs aren't nimble? With that commotion just now, do you want the entire Dahuang swamp to know that you're here? Big Bao's voice was filled with disdain. The elder coughed. That was an accident. Who told you two to keep quarreling? It's more important to find the girl first. That's right. We can only come out during the night of the red moon once a month. Other than that, we don't know what happens in the outside world. The time we can freely move around outside is at most 4 hours. This is a rare opportunity, so we have to hurry up. The few of them stopped quarreling and rushed down together. It seems like that thing's seal broke by itself. Look at this place. How much has it ruined? It's been so many years. That seal should have rotted long ago. It's already a miracle that it can last until today. However, I'm curious. Could it be that the girl calculated the time long ago and specially came at this time? It's not impossible, but she's really gutsy to barge in here. I guess she should have broken through again, right? Isn't that obvious? Back then the space below seems to be locked up by that thing? Girl is really there. I'll go check it out first. Get out of my way. What's there to quarrel about? Do the two of you want to compete with me in terms of looks? Girl has always liked me the most. Alright, I'm going. Damn pervert, you're shameless. Chu Luiwei was focused on cultivating. After breaking through to the intermediate stage 5, she intentionally slowed down the speed of absorbing energy. There was a gap between the intermediate stage and the peak stage, and she had to seriously fill it to ensure that it was solid. Even though Chu Luiwei wanted to improve her skills as soon as possible, she wouldn't blindly do something radical. Suddenly, her ears twitched. Why did it sound like someone was talking? She opened her eyes and looked up subconsciously. The green halo almost completely blocked her vision, and the space above was dark. She couldn't see anything clearly. It didn't seem any different from before. Liu, what's wrong? Taizu asked curiously. Chu Luiwei pointed up. Taizu, did you hear someone talking? No. Taizu looked up curiously. How could there be someone here? Did you hear wrongly? Chu Luiwei frowned slightly. At this time, it was indeed unlikely that someone would come here. Maybe she really heard wrongly. She retracted her gaze and was about to continue cultivating when she suddenly heard a call. Girl, digression, 12 o'clock. Tomorrow, mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 770. Chu Liyue's heart seemed to have been touched by something. She looked up again. Although she still couldn't see anything clearly, she had an inexplicable feeling that she was being watched. That voice was definitely not her hallucination. That voice was calling her, and it sounded very intimate. However, that voice and tone were very unfamiliar. She seemed to have never heard it before. But somehow, it seemed vaguely familiar. There weren't many people who could call her that, and those who had the ability to reach here were even fewer. Was it? The moment Chu Luiwei looked up, the three people who were originally filled with anticipation and joy were all stunned. It's been a few years. How did this girl's appearance change so much? And she looks much younger? Lan Xiao, who was at the front, crossed his arms and touched his chin with one hand as he said in a daze. He only knew that when one cultivated to a certain level, they would never age. But that depended on their age. If a 20-year-old and an 80-year-old crossed that threshold at the same time, there would naturally be a huge difference. Other than that, he had never heard of anyone who could rejuvenate themselves. Lan Xiao, your eyesight isn't as good as mine. That girl isn't a girl. Diwu Zhangzi stroked his white beard and chuckled. You haven't seen that girl for a few years, and you actually forgot what she looks like? Let's see what you can say when she finds out. If it were any other time, Lan Zhan would definitely refute him. But at this moment he couldn't care less. His eyes were staring straight at the girl below, and his brows were slightly furrowed. That's not right. He naturally remembered what the girl looked like, and logically speaking, he definitely wouldn't mistake her. But this girl, that's the girl. Dugamabao, who had been silent all this while, finally spoke. Although his tone was cold, because his voice was too similar to a baby's, it sounded a little out of place, as if a child was pretending to be an adult. Lan Xiao and Diwu Zhangzi both fell silent for a moment. Although her appearance is different, the aura of this soul is definitely the same. Although Dugamabao had a bad temper, he had always been very accurate in this aspect. Since even he had said so, then it must be true. Diwu Zhangzi widened his eyes in shock and lowered his head to take a closer look. However, The girl had already retracted her gaze. From their position, they could only see the top of her head. No wonder. When I first saw her, I subconsciously thought that she was a girl. I wasn't mistaken. Lan Xiao heaved a sigh of relief and glanced at Diwu Zhangzi. I didn't recognize her, but you? Diwu Zhangzi's face flushed red, and he was somewhat embarrassed. This isn't entirely my fault. Who would have thought that this lass would actually change her appearance? Everything was fine. How did it end up like this? Diwu Zhangzi's question was also what the other two wanted to know. Lan Xiao pondered seriously for a moment. Could it be that the little girl dislikes her appearance for not being beautiful enough? Was that why he changed his face? Dugumabai looked at him as if he was an idiot. Damn pervert, do you think everyone is like you? You can change your face as you wish, but can this girl do the same? Besides, who in this world would think that her previous face wasn't beautiful enough? Lan Xiao didn't mind being called a damn pervert. Instead, he deeply agreed with the latter sentence. That's true. If it weren't for the fact that he doted on this girl, he would have already taken her face. That was really a rare beauty in this world. He raised his eyebrows slightly, and there was some admiration in his eyes. However, her current appearance is still a little young and inexperienced. When she grows up, she won't lose to the past at all. Speaking of which, why is she tormenting herself like this? Dugumabao's face darkened. Not only did she change her face, but her body has also changed. These words made the other two's faces change slightly. To them, changing one's appearance was nothing much. However, it was different after changing her body. One must know that to a cultivator, the physical body was extremely important. Then, core of essence. Yuan Meridian. Once the physical body was abandoned, all these would be abandoned too. Moreover, that girl had the Tianjing Yuan Meridian. The three of them fell into a short silence. Previously, they relied on their perception of the girl's soul. However, they didn't expect that other than this soul, the rest of the girl's body had been replaced. What exactly was going on? Do you think that the girl hasn't come for these few years? Could it be that she didn't forget, but something happened? Diwu Zhangzi said slowly. They had never thought of this possibility before. The girl was smart and cunning, and she was extremely talented and strong. Back then, she could still exchange a few blows with them. How could something have happened? From the bottom of their hearts, they didn't want to believe this guess. However, if this was true, what exactly happened to cause her to change her body and start all over again? Diwu Zhangzi said, let's wait first. It seems that the girl is now at odds with that Tian baby. It won't be too late to ask her when she comes out. Dugamabao clenched his fists, and his body was filled with killing intent. Lan Zhao's eyebrows twitched. He was afraid that he would make a scene now and start a massacre. He quickly said, Hey Big Bao. Calm down. The girl hasn't come out yet. We'll talk about everything after we find out. What's the use of getting angry now? Dugumabao gritted his teeth and said word by word, Where the hell did that Rong Xiu kid go? His Highness the Holy Sun, who was reading files at his desk, suddenly sneezed. He put down the brush in his hand, rubbed his eyebrows, and chuckled. Seems like someone is thinking about me. He paused for a moment and finished reading all the files in front of him. Then he got up and walked to the window. A snow-white figure suddenly flew down from the sky at high speed. The soldiers who were standing guard outside the hall all looked up in surprise. How long had it been? Why did His Highness's devil beast look like it had become stronger again? Shue Shue swept across the empty space in front of the hall, and a layer of frost actually condensed on the ground. Its figure had already entered the hall and disappeared in front of everyone's eyes. This time, Shue Shue still chose to break the window and enter. Fortunately, the hall was spacious enough, and the items used were all top-notch, so there was no need to worry about them being damaged. Shue Shue leaped into the room. Rong Xiu looked at it, and his thin lips curved up. You sure know how to pick the right time. Shue Shue had already guessed what its master wanted it to do. It wagged its tail happily and looked at Rong Xiu with its icy blue eyes. After waiting for a while, Rong Xiu's smile deepened. You can go first. I plan to bring Shui along later, but it seems like I can't wait anymore. Shui was very excited and ran out. Its roar shook the sky. It wasn't hard to tell how happy it was. Rong Xiu looked at its rapidly disappearing figure and raised his eyebrows. Even he felt a headache from the anger of those few people. Let Shui go first. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 771. At this moment, Shui had no idea that it had been sold by its master. It was overjoyed as it tore through space and plunged into it. It headed straight for De Huang's swamp. After a while, Rong Xiu retracted his gaze. After pondering for a moment, he pushed the door open and walked out. Greetings, Your Highness. Seeing him come out, the soldiers outside the door immediately bowed respectfully. You may rise. Rong Xiu's expression had returned to calmness, and no one could tell that he was angry. 36 respected Elder Ming hasn't returned yet? Not yet, Your Highness. Rong Xiu narrowed his eyes slightly. Calculating the time, he had been gone for quite some time. According to 36 respected Elder Ming's temper, he shouldn't have wasted so much time with the Ming division. He didn't intend to get involved in this. After all, the Ming division was too difficult to deal with. But now, he had to rush to De Huang's swamp as soon as possible. Then, he had to find 36 respected Elder Ming to discuss this matter. He thought for a moment, then walked forward. In the dim space, the surroundings were silent. However, Chu Luiyue felt as if someone was whispering in her ear. Although she couldn't hear it clearly, it was still there. Only after a long time had passed did it gradually quiet down. She glanced at Taizu without batting an eyelid, but didn't see any abnormality in his expression. It seemed that Taizu really didn't hear anything. Strange, Chu Luiyue lowered her eyes and thought to herself. Could it be that someone deliberately let me hear these voices? But the other party doesn't seem to have any ill intentions, and even, there's some undisguised joy in doting. It's as if they were very familiar with each other. Chu Luiyue thought for a while, but still came up with nothing. In the end, she closed her eyes, put away her thoughts, and continued to devour the 2 Tian babies' power. Bang! A crisp and soft sound was heard. Another fragment fell from the heaven-wrecking holy seed. Then, it flew silently toward Chu Luiyue and melted into the water screen, turning into a water droplet and entering her body. Seeing this scene, the three of them were all stunned. Even the furious Dugumabao was stunned. He stopped scolding Rong Xiu halfway. What is this girl doing? That layer of crystal was formed after the 2 Tian baby swallowed thousands of years of power. It was specially used to protect itself before it matured. She actually swallowed it just like that? Lan Xiao clicked his tongue. I didn't expect that the lass would become younger, and her ability would also increase. See, I told you that you can't just dig it out and give it to her, right? Now, the little girl can deal with it herself. Such top-notch existences usually had spirituality. It wasn't impossible to force it to submit, but if it carried unwillingness and anger, there would eventually be hidden dangers. Only by completely suppressing it and making it submit to him could it truly be considered his own. In that case, he wouldn't have to worry about using it in the future. Although the little girl was only gnawing on small pieces, it was still extremely outstanding. As long as there was enough time, she would definitely be able to rely on her own ability to take down the 2 Tian baby. Diu Zhangzhe was secretly amazed. What is that water curtain? Can you guys see it? The lass is only a stage 5 warrior now, but with that water curtain, she can actually go against the 2 Tian baby and even have the upper hand. Lan Xiao looked over, shook his head, and said very honestly, I can't see it. Dugumabao held back for a long time before saying unwillingly, I can't see it. The other two looked at him in surprise. Debao, you've been roaming the continent for many years and have seen more rare treasures than the two of us combined. There's actually something that you can't see the origin of? He had a fiery temper and was proud and stubborn. It wasn't easy for him to admit it. Dugumabao waved his hand in annoyance. It's so far away, and there's the two Tian babies' divine realm blocking it. What can you see? When the lass finishes dealing with the two Tian baby, can't she just say it herself? No matter what, it's not an ordinary item. Shengguan Wan and the rest finally returned to Xiling after passing through several teleportation portals. The Pingliang Square was as noisy as usual. Suddenly, the largest teleportation portal in the middle started rotating slowly. Everyone turned to look at him, their faces filled with shock. The teleportation portal is actually moving. Could it be that the third princess and the rest are coming back? It can't be, right? Didn't they just leave not long ago? Plus the time spent on the journey back and forth. They can't be coming back right after reaching De Huang Swamp, right? But that teleportation portal is exclusively for them. Ever since they left, it hasn't been moved. Could it be that someone dares to use it without permission? Isn't that someone tired of living? While everyone was discussing, the surrounding blackguards had already reacted quickly. The people on Pingliang Square were all chased down. The blackguards surrounded the area, and the transportation array in the middle was also surrounded in a circle. The cold and stern black cavalry was ready for battle. It was as if they were welcoming a big shot. Seeing this scene, what else could the crowd not understand? To be able to make the black cavalry like this, the third princess and the rest must be back. In the face of such a serious aura, many people were silent. However, their eyes were still fixed on the center. Obviously, everyone wanted to see the results of the third princess leading the army to De Huang Swamp to help His Majesty get the medicine. Soon, several figures appeared on the teleportation portal. Who else could it be but the third princess Shengguan Wan? Standing beside her was Jiang Yuqing. The surrounding black cavalry immediately knelt down to welcome her. Welcome back, third princess. The onlookers naturally had to bow as well. In an instant, a large number of people knelt down in all directions. Rise, Shengguan Wan said. Everyone stood up one after another. However, when they saw Shengguan Wan's appearance clearly, many people were surprised. Shengguan Wan's face was covered with a veil. Moreover, she was wearing a cloak with the hood on her head, almost covering half of her face. In such a dress, everyone could only see a pair of eyes, and the rest was tightly covered. Although it was winter at this time, because it was almost spring, it was not that cold. It was really a little strange for Shengguan Wan to be dressed like this. However, ordinary people were naturally not qualified to ask these questions. A young man stepped forward. He seemed to be the general of the Black Cavalry. The last General Lu Shan greets the third princess. Eldest young master. Deputy General. Shengguan Wan did not want to stay here any longer, so she directly said, all the Black Cavalry soldiers and disciples of various sects have worked very hard on this trip. Go back and rest. In addition, I have something important to discuss with the court officials. Pass down the order. All the major sect leaders and aristocratic family heads are to go to the palace immediately. Although Lu Shan was confused, he immediately said, yes. Digression. In the morning, the editor suddenly said that the names of the articles could not be punctuated, so everyone began to change the names. It was a chaotic morning. The meeting continued at 6 p.m. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from AI Network. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.